Chapter 166. A day later, in the dim cabin, the girl's voice trembled. Her words were full of embarrassment and helplessness. "Hey, don't move so much. I'm sorry, I can't help it." "So, Mr. Luoya, can you explain why you used that spell? The ship was almost frozen by you." The girl's stern voice sounded. The black-haired boy who was shivering from the cold couldn't help but feel depressed. After holding it in for a long time, Luoya could only helplessly explain. "I just wanted to try it. I really didn't want to make it so big." "Ahem, well, I'm wrong." Forget it, I'm too lazy to blame you." Seeing Luoya's good attitude and shivering body, the red-haired girl's eyes flashed with sympathy. She stretched out her hand and snapped her fingers. The gemstones inlaid on the wall in the room immediately bloomed with brilliance. The light of the ruby shone on Luoya's body and accelerated his blood flow. Originally, this gemstone was used in the medical room to stop bleeding. Now on Luoya's body, it was used in reverse to increase the heat. Next, the gemstones with several spells such as temperature increase, ice absorption, and so on lit up. In the dazzling light, Luoya's situation improved a lot. Under the illumination of so many operating lights, the chief surgeon finally came to the stage. Xia Luo stretched out her hand and put it on Luoya's shoulder. After the boy's trembling knees stabilized, she sat sideways. Her body gently leaned on the boy's chest, and her body began to emit a faint light. Golden soul, this was the core item of the Sophia family, or the Highland Elf bloodline, to exert the power. Its essence was actually not gold, but a mixture of curses with gold components. In general, it could be hard or soft. The reason why the golden warship was called the golden warship was because there were these things flowing in the hull. They could strengthen the curse of the Highland Elf bloodline by several times, or even dozens of times. The keel of the golden warship was made up of solidified golden souls, which could ensure that the ship would not fall apart no matter what happened. The rest of the acceleration, weight reduction, and cannons were handed over to the liquid circulation golden souls. The system formed by this could be said to be quite advanced. With this technology, the Sophia dynasty could even suppress the seafolk and become the overlord of the sea. Of course, there were pros and cons. The golden warship's weakness was that it had to be controlled by a bloodline holder of the family Sophia. Once the person was gone, the ship was basically useless. Just like the previous St. Paul, once the vice captain died, the warship was paralyzed. Returning to being an ordinary ship was like a piece of meat in the eyes of the seafolk. However, these were only the functions of the golden warship. Usually, the golden soul was considered the Sophia family's protective curse vessel. The liquid metal-like material could block most attacks, and was the best shield. Pure golden curses could also be separated from the golden soul, which had more uses. For example, the current contact enhancement. Luoya named it Omnipotent Muscle and Bone Pads. "How do you feel? Are you feeling better?" "Yeah, it's not that cold anymore. Speaking of which, I feel like your skills are even better than yesterday. I'm also improving. Besides, if I don't learn well, Xia Luo recalled what happened yesterday and blushed. Luoya coughed awkwardly. His gaze wandered around and finally stopped at the young lady's red lips. Recalling the moment when he woke up from his deep sleep, and their eyes met, Luoya felt a little dizzy. Supporting Xia Luo's slim waist, the black-haired young man couldn't help but feel a little restless. She was indescribably beautiful, pure, and adorable. She was kind-hearted and willing to sacrifice herself to save him. If they didn't meet so late, Luoya really suspected that he would marry Xia Luo for the rest of his life. Sighing at the young lady's charm, Luoya shook his head and looked at the system to see the reason for his current behavior. Touch of Frozen Earth. A skill transformed from part of the ancient, terrifying disaster ability. When the frozen earth descends, everything will return to calm. Release a directional freezing air to the surroundings. It can be attached to any form of attack or defense. The range and strength are determined by the user's curse power. Side effect: intermittent cold. Looking at the side effects, Roha sighed. He didn't think that one day he would become a boxer, and what he learned was the 7 damages fist. If you want to freeze someone, freeze yourself first. Master Yi, I've learned a lot. Xia's world was realistic. Great power often came with a heavy price. In the past, Luoya could be said to have never touched this area until Touch of Frozen Earth taught him a lesson. This morning, the golden ship was caught by the sea folk. A huge sea monster with a group of scaly people stretched out its tentacles covered in mucus and wanted to wrap around the St. Mary. Luoya, who faced the threat of tentacles for the first time, didn't dare to hold back. He decisively used Touch of Frozen Earth. It was a freezing air flow wrapped in ice. When the ice mist swept across the sea like a dragon, not to mention the scaly people, sea monsters, and even the morning fog froze at that moment. This short encounter was quickly won by the humans, but for Luoya, it was a failure because he froze the sea monster's claws on the deck and couldn't remove them. This giant tentacle extended more than 20 meters out of the ship, and the other end was directly dragged in the sea like a tail. Chapter 167. For the next day, Luoya had a pretty good time. With Xiao Luot as his milk bottle, Luoya became arrogant. Freezing air? Use. 7 injuring fists? Hit. Since his moves were powerful, he had to find a strong opponent to hit. It didn't matter if he was injured. He could just find Xiao Luot and let her train her control of the golden soul. It had to be said that hugging Xiao Luot was very comfortable. The feeling of holding the girl's exquisite and luxurious body in his hands fully satisfied Luoya's possessiveness. Moreover, the big miss was very cute when she was shy. Luoya couldn't get enough of it every time. Of course, as a vigilant and responsible person, Luoya didn't do anything to Xiao Luot. The reason why he repeatedly tormented Xiao Luot was to familiarize himself with the skill. Frozen Earth Touch was a rare skill that came from Luoya's origin substance crown. According to the system, Frozen Earth Maker was a mutated version of the crown stone. Although Luoya didn't understand the details, he was sure that this was a unique skill. Unlike the Gulandair's strength, origin substance and undying transformation, Frozen Earth Touch was a skill that belonged to Luoya. It could be practiced and grew. The more he used it, the more he could understand it and become more powerful. That's right, Luoya was leveling up because he was very uneasy. Originally, Luoya thought that with his interference, Egg's strength was damaged and the Golden Fleet's flagship, the St. Mary, had greatly increased its speed. The fleet should be able to shake off the enemy and hold out for 2.5 days for him and Xiao Luot to return safely. However, Isha Bela's words at noon made him feel very uneasy. The Silver Eagles haven't found Gordon and the others for 2 days in a row. Something's wrong. The Silver Eagle was a wide-area search curse vessel used on the Golden Warship to investigate the enemy's situation. It was inlaid with silver and gems, and its flying speed was far faster than ordinary birds by relying on curse power. Before this, Isha Bela and Gordon's fleet were monitoring each other, but since the arrival of Luoya and others, Gordon's fleet had disappeared. Obviously, Luoya and the others had changed the original strategy of both sides, making the future even more confusing. After learning that there was no news of the rebel fleet led by Gordon, although Luoya didn't show any reaction on the surface, he was nervous and uneasy. He would feel uncomfortable if he didn't do anything. Increasing his strength, even if it was just a little, was Luoya's current idea, and he put it into practice. In Luoya's intensive familiarization and practice, the scaly people were turned into popsicles and sunk into the sea one by one. The instinct of the tentacle sea monsters made them start to stay away from Luoya, because they would lose if they fought with Luoya. The half-frozen octopus claw on the ship was a lesson learned. Obviously, the mollusks also had a desire to survive. After several rounds of confrontation, the enemies were scared away by the cold air. Luoya, who was bored, wanted to develop and expand his life function. He wanted to see if he could use it as a refrigerator, but he soon found out that it didn't work. The Frozen Earth Maker's cold air was different from the normal cold air. There was no way to adjust the power at all. With just a light sweep, it could freeze the squid claw into an open hammer. The frozen items were particularly difficult to melt, and they still couldn't be thawed after a day. After the 5th hug with Milady in the evening and his waist was pinched, the black-haired boy also knew that he had gone too far. He could only gnaw on the octopus on the deck. However, what he didn't expect was that a guest came while he was enjoying the scenery. Take this, the best white fruit wine. The words carried a hint of a smile. Luoya reached out and took the bottle of wine. He looked at the woman walking over and smiled. Sister Isabella, I'm still a child. This wine is a bit strong. Men's wine is always strong. Isn't it good to get used to it in advance? Men? But you drink it too. Rulers have no gender. Isabella chuckled and took a sip from her bottle. She walked to Luoya's side and leaned against the railing to look at the night sea. At this time, dozens of ships were shining brightly on the surface of the sea. Vaguely, the singing of sailors could be heard. Luoya opened the bottle cap and took a sip of the wine. He couldn't help but grin at the spiciness. Isabella saw this and laughed. She snatched the white fruit wine and gave Luoya another bottle of beer. Forget it, drink this. Beer is more compatible with the boy. Her Majesty said so with a smile. Luoya couldn't help but smile. He looked at the beautiful and handsome woman and suddenly felt a little envious of Vincent. Presumably, only his ancestors' excellent appearance, strength, and wonderful fate could win the favor of such a woman. Ordinary men would feel ashamed standing in front of her, let alone trying to court her. Sister Isabella, why are you suddenly looking for me? Luoya, who had become quite familiar with her over the past few days, asked softly as he tasted the new wine. The brown-haired woman smiled. After pondering for a while, she said, Nothing. I just want to ask what you think of Xiaoluot. Xiaoluot? Yes, I heard that although you two are engaged, you haven't known each other for long, so I want to hear your thoughts about her. Chapter 168. The next morning, Luoya was awakened by the sound of the alarm. When the black-haired teenager opened his eyes, the gemstones on the wall were glowing red under the effect of the curse. He was shocked and quickly got up. Although there were many gemstones on the golden warship, the ones that woke the crew up were not of this color. Red gemstones represented an alarm on the ship. When it lit up, it meant only one thing, and that was the appearance of the enemy. The sound of the crew's hurried footsteps and noises came from the corridor. Luoya got up, put on his coat and rushed out of the door. He saw Xiaoluot, who also rushed out of the door. Luoya, it's an enemy attack. The reddish-brown-haired girl frowned uneasily. Luoya's face did not change, but he could not help but sigh in his heart. After all the calculations, the danger could not be avoided. Witness countdown, 24 hours and 47 minutes. Looking at the countdown in the system, Luoya knew that there was no way to avoid it. With more than a day left, they would either win or lose in the sea battle. There was no way to delay it on land. Thinking of this, the teenager grabbed the girl's hand and rushed to the upper deck. Along the way, the two of them saw a group of people looking to the east. Luoya turned his head and saw a fleet emerging from the sea under the light of the rising sun. Without a doubt, the 6 light spots were the 6 disasters that Gordon and the others worshipped as the gods. As for the reason why the fleet suddenly caught up with the golden warship, Luoya also found out. The seafolk. Under the light of the rising sun, the strange-looking tentacle monsters in the sea were gradually sinking into the deep sea. They hated the strong light and would only appear on cloudy days. However, they were not interested in the warships that were within reach. Obviously, the sea monsters and the rebels led by Gordon were in cahoots. In order to take back the egg, they had joined hands with the seafolk and became the traitors of the human army. Gordon should not have the ability to communicate with the seafolk. Why would those fishes help him? If it's Gordon, it's indeed impossible. However, our enemy is not only them. Isabella looked at the enemy warships in the distance while surrounded by sailors. Her eyes were full of seriousness. I'm afraid it's a trick of the Saint Heroes Guild, Her Majesty said as she gave the order loudly. Dozens of warships began to set off amidst the sound of the broadcast. They gathered in formation and took up advantageous positions. Hundreds of silver eagles on the warships soared in the sky to observe the situation of the enemy. The detection under the water was also activated. In the distance, Gordon's fleet was also making an emergency turn. The captains were personally steering the ship, trying their best to keep it parallel to the Golden Fleet's warships, so as to avoid being shot to the bottom of the sea by the bow cannons. More than an hour had passed in the midst of their respective preparations. The distance between the two sides was getting closer and closer. In a situation where both sides were clear about each other's tactics, no one would take the initiative to become the target of the main cannons. Close-range shooting and boarding battle would become the main theme. The sailors on the mast readied their arrows, and the soldiers on the side of the ship held their shields. While both sides were tense, a light flashed on St. Mary's. It was a communication request from St. Martin, the flagship of the rebels. Isabella looked into the distance. Her gaze passed through the vast sea and landed on the white-haired old man at the bow of the flagship opposite her. She thought for a moment and finally turned on the device gently. "It's been a long time, Isabella." An old voice rang out, greeting the brown-haired queen. It was also the first and last communication before the battle began. "Isabella, you should know that our race inherited the bloodline of the Highland Elves. Our bloodline gave us glory, and the source of our power, loyalty, was the source of our power. Mother Goddess was the great existence that our ancestors were loyal to in the past. It was the time when our race was at its most prosperous. Only by regaining the faith of the past can we regain the glory of the past." Gordon Sophia's old face flushed red. He looked forward and shouted under the gaze of tens of thousands of people on dozens of warships. "For thousands of years, the prosperous times have become a thing of the past. Destruction is unavoidable like fate. The power of Mother Goddess and the oracles is far from what we can contend against. Compared to them, humans are like eggs. Rely on the strong, obey fate, and regain loyalty. This is the way for us to survive," the old man said as he looked up at the sky. His eyes were filled with reverence. The sea was silent. The sailors looked at each other. The loyalty source and the cruel reality made them cower. If it was justifiable, and if they were powerless to resist, then it seemed that it was only right to stand on the side of the strong. Gordon's words undoubtedly shook the will of the warriors. Amidst the clamor of the crowd, Isabella looked determined. She stepped forward and stood at the highest point of the warship, looking at the end of the waves. "Gordon, don't play such tricks anymore. Perhaps our ancestors were loyal to Mother Goddess, but don't forget that before that, all intelligent races were children of Shia. If regaining the faith of the past can make us stronger, then it can only be the primordial goddess. As for the fate of destruction, don't make me laugh my head off." For thousands of years, the masters of the world have changed many times, but the civilization is still the same. Where is the invincible Mother Goddess that you speak of now? Who is controlling one of the 6 disasters? Humans may not be strong enough yet, but fate is far from over. What right do you have to talk about the future of humans when you've already prostrated yourself on the ground? Isabella looked back and looked at her subordinates on the dozens of warships behind her. It was as if she could see the history of the birth of this huge fleet. "Do you think we don't know how strong the enemy is? No, we know. We also know that this mission is extremely dangerous. However, as the most powerful maritime group of the current human civilization, and the army that has preserved the best technology, we represent the civilization itself. At this critical moment when the human world in the north is in danger, we are the last defenders of the entire civilization. When our descendants look back on history thousands of years later, they will be proud of our courage." Chapter 169. In the control room, Xia Luo looked at the vice-captain, who was nervously observing the situation nearby. She gently opened the door and walked into the ship. As she walked down the stairs, she looked at the colorful gem in her hand silently. The tremors of the ship made her feet slightly numb. The roars of the soldiers could be heard even in the cabin. However, these noises did not make Xia Luo excited. On the contrary, it made her feel very depressed. As the eldest daughter of Sorophia, although Xia Luo had not experienced much bloodshed since she was young, she was not a weak princess. Her powerful extraordinary strength and talent meant that her life would not be peaceful since she was born. However, even so, this battle was still unbearable for her. She was even secretly sad, because this was a civil war. Unlike the terrifying scaly monsters that Luoya fought against before, both sides of this battle were humans. They were even Xia Luo's ancestors. Although the girl firmly supported Isabella, even if she won, Xia Luo would not be too happy, because in the end, both sides would consume the strength of the humans. The Highland Elves would be greatly weakened in this civil war. Isabella was very clear about Xiao Luo's thoughts. It was better to say that all the people of Sorophia hated this war from the bottom of their hearts. That was why the queen did not let Xiao Luo, a girl with extraordinary talent who stayed away from the internal strife of Sorophia, fight on the battlefield. She did not want Xiao Luo's hands to be stained with the blood of her own people. Putting the colorful gem that could form an absolute defense in a critical moment into her pocket, Xiao Luo strolled towards the egg. The mission that Isabella gave her was to wait here. Although it was unlikely if the Golden Fleet lost, then Xiao Luo would activate the Eternal Seal plan and bury the egg of disaster in the depths of the sea forever. Stepping on the frozen ground, Xiao Luo suddenly missed the days when she and Luoya were in the study of Akat Hill every day. Although those days were boring and there was no progress, now that she thought about it, she felt very fulfilled. Every morning, Xiao Luo would start with a cup of scented tea personally brewed by the young man. She would read the information carefully, eat breakfast under his reminder, and argue noisily about salty and sweet. Although they would occasionally quarrel, Xiao Luo was already somewhat used to it. Sometimes she even found it quite interesting. After confiscating his potions, he would definitely feel sleepy in the afternoon. As expected, he should take an afternoon nap. No, he probably didn't need it anymore. At this thought, Xiao Luo stopped in her tracks. She looked around and couldn't help but lower her eyes. Indeed, there was no need. Luoya and Xiao Luo. Although the two of them were connected by marriage, in reality, the reason they were together was because of Xiao Luo's employment. The clues of the Sophia dynasty and the lost technology were Xiao Luo's original goals. But now this goal had obviously been achieved and even exceeded. At the same time, the relationship between Luoya and Xiao Luo was also coming to an end. The goal of cooperation had been achieved, and the annulment of the marriage had been agreed upon. Next, it was time to end the song and disperse. From now on, their lives would return to their original paths. Luoya didn't need to brew tea anymore. He would once again become the young and promising feudal lord. Xiao Luo wouldn't complain about the sweetness of the dishes, because she didn't need to worry about the other person at the dining table. Their own brilliance and no longer interacted with each other. This was their ending. Xiao Luo lowered her head and stared blankly at the ice and snow in front of her. Suddenly, she realized something strange. She didn't feel any joy. No matter if it was getting rid of the marriage or obtaining the lost technology and bloodline curse of the Sophia dynasty, she didn't feel anything in her heart. Instead, she felt miserable for some reason. He would probably return to the days when he was in love with those girls. The girl couldn't help but feel a lump in her throat. After thinking for a long time, she could only force a smile. There's nothing I can do. In his heart, I'm probably just an annoying employer, Xiao Luo muttered to herself. She couldn't help but feel that her mood was very strange. However, the self-pitying girl didn't notice that while she was lost in her thoughts, a humanoid figure had silently stood up behind her. His body was made of liquid, and most of his facial features were missing. Only his terrifying mouth full of jagged teeth cracked open, as if he was silently mocking her. If we can still be together. No, you can't go anywhere. A hoarse and ear-piercing reply came from beside her ear. Xiao Luo's eyes widened, and she suddenly turned around. Sharp claws made of liquid pierced towards the girl's neck. Xiao Luo's protective pendant that sensed danger suddenly released a burst of light. But what the girl didn't expect was that the barrier that could stop a high-level extraordinaire was actually shattered by the sharp claws. At this critical moment, Xiao Luo held the rainbow gem and wanted to build another defense, but it was all too late. Under the girl's desperate gaze, the sharp claws made of liquid came head-on. With the sound of a blade piercing into flesh, blood and flesh splattered. Crimson blood flowed down Xiao Luo's cheeks. The warm feeling brought with it the warmth of its owner. The girl widened her eyes and stared at the boy who suddenly descended from the sky and protected her in his arms. Her brain was numb and couldn't function. Hey, are you okay? I'm fine. A low voice sounded beside her ear. Xiao Luo responded blankly. She looked at the familiar boy. Her body trembled as she lowered her head to look at the wound on his chest. At the same time, A hoarse and ear-piercing voice sounded. Chapter 170. In the cabin, the man and woman who had just escaped from danger hugged each other. Facing Luo Ye's decision to kill them, Xia Luot, who had experienced the terror of the enemy, felt uneasy. It's the sea outside, it's the liquid monster's home ground. I'm not going, it's his home ground. If I go it won't be. But he can hide in the Golden Soul. It's obvious that he's here to kill you and Isabella. He must die, the only one who can kill him is me. Luo Ye held the girl's face with both hands, looking straight at Xia Luot's trembling pupils. His emotions were affected by his ability, as cold as ice, but his words were full of gentleness. Wait for me here, be good. Okay. The girl blushed and nodded under Luo Ye's gaze. She activated the gem in her hand to open the barrier, and at the same time, Luo Ye's figure disappeared in the dancing snowflakes. Under the deliberate actions of both sides, the battle between the Golden Fleet and the Rebel Fleet had entered a white-hot state. The sound of the dead and injured sailors falling into the sea continued, and the bodies of the soldiers fighting fiercely in the water floated on the surface of the sea with puffs of blood. The chaotic battlefield and the sea environment should have allowed the liquid monster to be like a fish in water, but at this time, it had completely lost its usual confidence and leisure. Because it was facing a pursuit. Frost and cold, those were the most difficult things for the liquid monster to fight against, but now it was being targeted by an opponent who completely restrained it. It didn't know what mistake it made, but there was no doubt that even in the sea, Luo Ye could accurately capture its location. The black-haired boy was like a soul chaser in the story in the eyes of the liquid monster. Everything about him was so strange, whether it was the sudden increase in strength, the fact that it didn't know why it could see its eyes, or the terrifying frost, all made it uneasy. But it probably didn't expect that in Luo Ye's eyes, these were actually very simple and clear. Liquid life puppet Deoj Laisai Roderick. This was the liquid monster in Luo Ye's eyes. When Deoj Laisai drove the liquid puppet to board the ship under the disguise of the waves, the bloody disaster skill was activated. Luo Ye saw the monster enter the cabin through the deck. Knowing that Xia Luo might be the target, the boy made a prompt decision and killed his way in. Facts proved that Luo Ye was too impulsive. Even with the giant skeleton blocking him, the huge difference in strength still made Luo Ye had a trip to the gates of hell, but that was all in the past. Pei Tila's blessing, this skill that could only be used once, was far more powerful than Luo Ye imagined. Although the time was limited, it was able to raise Luo Ye's source rank to source rank 3. And with a high extraordinary rank as the foundation, Luo Ye's ability really blossomed, showing off its extraordinary power. The boy's body flashed in the air like a cannonball, and in a few seconds he had already caught up with the assassin in the sea. His body smashed into the sea, and before his toes touched the sea, the cold air had already created a pure white foothold for him to land on. But this wasn't enough. Frozen earth. In an indifferent and cold whisper, the source substance of the crown bloomed with a disaster of ice and snow. In the middle of the sea surrounded by the ship, a white area suddenly began to corrode. That was the blessing of eternal frost, the death god's lament. Touch of frozen earth. Under the support of Luo Ye's source rank, was no longer the same as before. Waves of frost gushed out like a volcano, spreading out like a huge wave, majestically spreading out in all directions. As a result, the waves became fixed, the waves became still, the seabirds in the sky silently fell, and everything returned to silence. Freezing the sea, this was a miraculous act that shocked everyone on the battlefield. The sound of cannons on the warships became clear at this moment, and the archers who had a good view shouted in disbelief. The soldiers on the deck also lost their heads out of fear, and the divers in the sea stopped fighting and scattered in all directions, beginning to flee for their lives. Realizing that something was wrong, the captains shouted loudly to change the rudder, but the enemy ships that were close to them were already frozen in the sea. Frost climbed up the hull of the ship, and the sailors who jumped off the ship had already turned into ice sculptures in midair. When they fell to the ground, they shattered into blood-red ice cubes. This terrifying scene caused the people on the warships to shrink into a ball. Deoj Laisai, I know you are here. Above the frozen sea, The black-haired young man looked at his feet with an indifferent expression. He opened his mouth and calmly spoke the details of the enemy. Puppeteer or puppet school? Is that how you are called? Luoya recalled the many schools in Bulonia, the country of scholars, in his mind, and filtered out the most likely name. Puppet school was a school that did not aim at one's own combat power, but to control all kinds of puppets to fight on behalf of the user. It advocated that the human body had limits, but the puppets controlled could be ever-changing. The appearance, shape, attribute, and nature could be changed according to the enemy. Even after costly rituals, the puppets could have special functions, such as the first attack that launched the attack had a special attack on the protective cursed item. However, as the saying went, there were pros and cons. Although the puppet school's puppets were extremely flexible, the puppeteer himself had no combat power. He could hardly move effectively in the process of controlling the puppets, and the source rank of the puppets could not be higher than the puppeteer himself. Chapter 171. Countdown, 40, 39, 38. In the cabin that was gradually turning cold, the black-haired youth calmly looked at the white-robed youth whose arm had been petrified. Daoj Leisai's body was trembling at this time. He stared at Luoya, unable to figure out why he would appear here. No, impossible. How did you find me? You and I looked at each other, right? How does your arm feel? Luoya answered the last question of the dying man in front of him indifferently. Daoj Leisai's face turned pale when he heard this. He glanced at his petrified arm. He did not expect that this small remnant of the curse power could make Luoya follow him all the way here. Wait, I'm a director of the Saint Heroes Society, and I have a very high position in the sect. You are Luoya, right? Tell me what you want, and I can satisfy you. Daoj Leisai's white eyes gradually regained their color. He squeezed out an ugly smile on his face and quickly explained his position. However, the black-haired youth's face did not change at all. Don't waste your energy. What you said is not important to me. Then what's important? You can tell me. Not you, it's very important to me. Luoya glared at the enemy who had come to kill Xia Luot, and the cold air on his body surged like a dragon. Daoj Leisai's face changed dramatically when he heard this. In the next moment, the puppet master's body suddenly burst into a bloody mist as he made his final struggle. Flesh decomposition. This was Daoj Leisai's last life-saving move. His body would become a bomb of curse power and explode violently. His body could be decomposed into thousands of pieces under the control of his mind. As long as one piece could escape, Daoj Leisai would have a chance to survive. Of course, the price of this was the loss of vital organs and functions for the rest of his life. He would live like a ghost, but this was nothing compared to death. After all, as long as he was alive, many things could be recovered little by little in this world where extraordinary power existed. After knowing that Luoya would not let him go, the puppet master's curse power was very decisive. In an instant, a violent explosion occurred in the narrow space of the spaceship, and a huge wave of curse power lifted everything into the sky. It was a bomb made by a source level 2 extraordinary with all his remaining curse power. When the bomb exploded, the violent fluctuation of curse power could be felt clearly even thousands of miles away. The spaceship Daoj Leisai was on was blown into two by the terrifying explosion. The bloody sailors and the broken deck rolled into the sea together, and the billowing smoke blocked the view. The puppet master's remaining consciousness could not help but feel a little relieved after the explosion. With such a powerful attack in such a small area, even if Luoya did not die, he should not be able to chase after him. The ability to freeze the sea looked terrible, but Daoj Leisai did not pay much attention to it. High-level extraordinary had many similar bloodline abilities that could do this, but even a source level 2 frost bloodline could not stop Daoj Leisai in his current state. After flesh decomposition, his curse power resistance would be ridiculously strong, which was why this skill could be used as a life-saving skill. Whether it was the great scholar of Bologna or the angel king of Saint Mestre, no one could stop Daoj Leisai in this state. As long as he survived, he would have a chance to return to his peak at such a young age. When the time came, he must kill this damn little bastard's whole family. The puppet master smashed into the sea with a firm belief. At the same time, the frozen energy on Luoya's body exploded again. Daoj Lasai laughed in his heart when he saw this. It was just a source level 3 frost skill. How could it trap him? The confident puppet master's decomposed body swooped into the sea from the air and rushed into the fog like rain. However, what happened next was the opposite of what he thought, and he could not even understand it. He was still frozen. Why? At this moment, countless questions floated in the young man's heart, but soon he found the reason. Wait, the source of this freezing energy is... How could it be? Daoj Lasai fled in horror, but it was too late. In just a few seconds, whether it was his body or his mind, the existence named Daoj Lasai had stopped functioning. You've become such a trash. You really saved me a lot of time. The black-haired young man stood on the sea and looked indifferently at the thousands of pieces of flesh falling and shattering. He shook his head in puzzlement in the rain of frozen flesh. Speaking of which, why does it feel like this escape skill is completely useless? Puzzled questions arose in the young man's heart, but he quickly threw them to the back of his mind. He could feel that Daoj Lasai's soul had completely returned to the underworld. Farewell, Mr. Daoj Lasai. The familiar ship, the familiar deck. When these were reflected in Luoya's eyes, the young man knew that he had arrived at his destination. On the deck of the St. Mary's, Luoya, who had returned from afar, stood quietly panting. The surroundings were already covered in frost. In the last half a minute of the Paitila's blessing skill, Luoya made full use of his remaining energy. He did not return from the enemy's camp calmly, but instead he greeted the enemy warmly. Chapter 172. Something's coming. This thought suddenly appeared in Luoya's mind, but he was able to confirm it almost immediately. It was a vague feeling, but it was also a pressure that couldn't be ignored. It trembled like a piece of ice suddenly pressed against the back of one's neck in the middle of a hot summer day. The pressure was also like the gloomy wind howling under the rolling dark clouds in the sky. Luoya's blurred consciousness quickly sobered up under this mysterious feeling. His golden pupils shrank, and the arm that was hugging Xia Luo tightened, startling the girl. Luoya? What's wrong? Are you in pain anywhere? The reddish-brown-haired girl wiped away her tears and asked anxiously. However, Luoya didn't know how to answer. He leaned on the girl's body in confusion and looked towards the horizon. Suddenly, he realized that the golden sun had disappeared at the limit of his vision. In the direction where the rising sun should have been, a black spot was expanding in the golden sunlight. It was like smoke, but also like a creeping darkness. Under Luoya's shocked gaze, the strange black thing swallowed everything. The light of the sun was covered, and everyone on the enemy's warship realized that something was wrong. Hey, what's that in the east? It's black. What's that? The sailors on the tall poles shouted to report the abnormality. The soldiers around Luoya frowned. Their long years of combat intuition told them that something was wrong. Xia Luo stopped wiping Luoya's sweat and followed Luoya's gaze to the east. The actions of the crowd caused a chain reaction. More and more people stopped what they were doing and looked towards the east. The gradually darkening sky caused the warships in the battle to automatically turn on their lights. The sound of cannon fire gradually stopped, and the people in the boarding battle began to split into two sides and look around vigilantly. What's that? Speak. Above the sea, Isha Bela roared angrily as she pressed the gem trigger against Gordon's head. However, the old man's consciousness was already hazy. His blurred eyes looked towards the dark sky, and his face was filled with fear and worship for the gods. That's why I said before, Isha Bela, don't try to resist. That will only lead to death. He has always been following behind us and obeying the Mother Goddess. That is our destiny. God's punishment will cleanse all traitors. Bang. In the midst of the sound of the trigger being pulled, the head of the fanatical believer shattered into pieces. Isabella looked indifferently at the dismembered corpse in front of her that sank into the sea, her tone cold. Even if you're the leader of the rebels, you're still a king. You can bow to your so-called God as a believer, but before that, every king has to consider their people first. The brown-haired queen looked up ahead. The darkness that covered the sky was rushing over from the distant horizon. The sky was blurry and the sea was no longer clear. Isabella vaguely understood what it was. It was the destroyer of civilization, the calamity of all living beings, the Lord of Terror that was once classified as a calamity by the ancient civilization. Its name was Mr. Darkness. That was the name given to it by the ancient Ents that it destroyed. It was one of the 6 calamities, of the same standard as the object that this huge fleet was escorting. However, unlike the frozen Earth creator that was still an egg, Mr. Darkness was a truly matured and terrifying calamity. It was a mythical monster that was born from the combination of fire and earth. The darkness that drowned everything was not some kind of curse power, but it was far more terrifying than that. It was dust, sand, and dust. It was the fog of death that would only be born from volcanic activity that shook the earth. The moving earth and the breathing of volcanoes were the true form of Mr. Darkness. It was also the reason why it was almost impossible to resist. It did not need to attack. It only needed to pass by, and what was left behind was death and silence. It was obvious that no one in the area could survive the attack of such a monster. Gordon's subservience and loyalty were of no use. His subordinates could only die. How foolish. Since ancient times, so many civilizations have been destroyed by them. How could there not be people who compromised? The people who resisted might not be around anymore, but how many of the people who obeyed them are still alive? The reason why the Highland Elves were able to continue their bloodline is not because of the Mother Goddess or these detestable monsters. It is because of the bloodline of the humans that you belittled. Isabella muttered to herself as she gazed at the approaching enemies in the distance. Since ancient times, most of the traitors who betrayed their own race did not have a good ending, let alone betraying their entire race. Under the oppressive sky, the queen gazed at the approaching calamity. She recalled the guesses of the Sage Guild. I didn't expect to be targeted by these fellows. It seems that the scholars' guesses were correct. These fellows really do possess intelligence. Isabella chuckled helplessly before the waves of destruction. But after that, her face revealed a calm and resolute expression. Perhaps this is the so-called fate. But even if the scales of fate have been fixed, Isabella will never bow down. Golden curses surged into the sky around the rare heroine. The communication between the ships immediately echoed in the sky above the entire sea. Brave warriors. There is no need to panic now that things have come to this. Just as I said before, the calamity of chaos has caught up with us. The footsteps of destruction are approaching our civilization. Gordon's illusions have been shattered. The ancient monster's targets are all humans here, regardless of friend or foe. Chapter 173. In the dark canyon, Luoya looked up into the distance. The black mountain range stretched as far as the eye could see. The towering mountains blocked the sun, and only a little bit of light could be seen from the gaps in the mountains. Petra's golden hair was shining in the dim environment, and her white robe had a unique enchanting charm. She closed her eyes and sat on the throne as if she was in a deep sleep. She didn't open her eyes until Roja came from afar. What a surprise, you don't seem to be in a hurry. The golden-haired woman stared at the young man walking over, and blinked her eyes in confusion. You should like that girl, right? If this continues, she will definitely die. I know, but venting my anger is meaningless to the current situation. It's just self-satisfaction. Even if I vent my anger, Xia Luot will still die. I don't want her to die. I want her to live. I don't want to lose her, so I have to be calm. Under Pei Tila's gaze, the black-haired young man's voice trembled as he spoke. The blonde woman was stunned. She stared at the young man who was clenching his teeth, and realized that his tightly clenched fist was beginning to bleed. I see. I understand. Then answer my question, Luoya Akat. What is the most beautiful thing in fate? The answer to the most beautiful thing is difficult. Everyone's sense of beauty is different. But if it's fate, then I think it's choice. Choice. Pei Tila widened his eyes in surprise. Luoya nodded. Isabella once said that fate is a game. It is fixed at the moment of its end, and before that, it is a variable. Therefore, in the face of the fate of the destruction of the past civilization, she used herself as a bargaining chip to suppress humanity. In the face of fate, she chose to resist. I once thought that the most beautiful thing of fate was resistance, But after thinking about it carefully, I realized that there was actually a loophole in this. The black-haired youth looked at the mountains that blocked the sun, and his gaze seemed to look into the distance. He recalled what the brown-haired woman had done, and his nose seemed to smell the intoxicating fragrance of the white fruit wine. If I had told her in advance that this escort journey would be her last journey, and if I had told her in advance about the final result of the scale, would Isabella have bowed to those monsters like Gordon and worshipped them as God's messenger? No, she won't. Luoya shook his head and calmly denied it. He sighed with respect and admiration. That's because Isabella is a ruler. She's not Sophia's ruler, but the ruler of all humans. Even if she knows that she's going to die, she'll definitely follow fate and set sail for the future of the entire human race. She'll sink the egg of disaster into the ocean forever. On the battlefield, there are heroes who face death unflinchingly in order to protect their comrades. Before the plague, there are doctors who know the danger but still treat the sick. They're all people who choose to follow their own fates. However, the light that they shine with their lives isn't any weaker than anyone else's. In fact, they're even more dazzling and worthy of respect. Choice. And the people who make these great choices, they're the most beautiful things of fate. No matter if they obey or resist, they're not the slaves of fate. Instead, they're the masters of fate. Luoya's explanation echoed throughout the canyon. His voice was firm and powerful. Paitila stared blankly at the youth below her. She looked into his golden eyes and repeated his words to herself. Not obeying or resisting, but choosing to become the most beautiful thing of all. The golden-haired woman leaned back on her throne and looked at the sky above the canyon. Her thoughts seemed to have traveled back thousands of years and returned to the mythical era. After a long while, she smiled lightly. Little fellow, thank you. You've allowed me to find meaning in obeying fate. Seems like you're quite satisfied with my answer. You've really found an answer that I like. Now no matter what, I can't stay out of this. Perhaps this is some kind of fate. Paitila smiled bitterly. She raised her head and looked into the distance. Her gaze fell on the battle between gold and black on the surface of the sea. Her expression gradually became serious. Little fellow, I'm willing to help you. However, I have to tell you a fact. That monster's strength is far beyond your imagination. You have a powerful protection spell on you. It's easy to save you, but to defeat the enemy and save that girl is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. You don't have enough spell power. Paitila's words made the black-haired youth fall into silence. His worries had finally become reality. Whether it was Gulandair or Paitila, they were great existences that had already become legends in the ancient times when the gods and demons were still around. However, no matter how powerful they were, they had already passed away. The only connection they had with the present world was Luoya. The last time he fought with Vader in the historical fragment was Luoya's limit. However, Vader was only at source rank 2 at that time. He had just broken through and was seriously injured. However, what about the 6 disasters now? Chapter 174. In the dark depths of the sea, Luoya's body was wrapped in a rainbow-colored light as she slowly awakened. On the surface of the sea, it was the final moment. At the forefront of the entire human army, at the head of dozens of warships, stood 2 figures under the golden torrent. One was a brown-haired woman, and the other was a girl with lighter hair. Isabella looked at Xia Luot with a surprised expression. Although it was weak, she had indeed sensed the energy fluctuations of the rainbow-colored crystal. Her Majesty glanced behind the girl, and widened her eyes when she didn't see Luoya. So that's how it is. What a silly child. But I don't have the right to criticize you. Isabella smiled bitterly as she opened her palm. A shining ring appeared in her tightly clenched palm. It was her engagement ring. Protecting mankind and civilization was indeed a great goal and a noble ideal, but it was very difficult for human beings to persist in a predicament with only ideals and goals. When disasters came, it was often the smaller and more intense feelings that made human beings burst out with unimaginable strength. For example, family and love. Protecting one's family and one's lover. This was what Xia Luo thought. At the same time, it was also the source of Isabella's courage and the motivation to move forward. Amidst the furious roar of the dark monster, the two women who were in love looked at each other and smiled. They were no longer afraid. They reached out their hands together. In the golden waves, the Colossus trembled and began its final battle with Mr. Darkness. At the same time, Luoya had already disregarded life and death in the dark depths of the sea. The black-haired boy reached out to touch the rainbow-colored barrier that isolated the seawater, his mind recalling the beautiful brown-haired figure. From the first time they met at Akate's house, to the cooperation in the study, to Austin's butterfly shadow, to the smoke on the golden battleship, everything had turned into the sound of a trigger being pulled. The moment Luoya fell into the sea, the last thing he saw of the girl wasn't a forced smile. Instead, it was an expression of holding back her tears. Those tears were the pain of parting and the fear of death. Why did Xia Luo do this? Was it to repay him for saving her? Was it because of her responsibility for what had happened? Or was it those feelings that were buried in his chest, burning to the point of being painful? It was impossible for people to understand each other. Individual differences would always exist, so Luoya could not determine the components of this behavior. But was this important? No, none of that was important. The most important thing was for her to survive and tell him personally. However, as the person to listen to it, I'm afraid that I might not be able to be there. The feeling of the curse power being stripped from his body continued. Luoya could feel that a huge body was being built in the darkness behind him. But just as Paitila said, his curse power was far from enough. He could only overdraw his life force to replace it. The red curse power once again engulfed Luoya, as if it was burning. The Gulandayer's immortality began to do its best to buy time for Luoya. But even so, the young man's body still had many negative statuses. His body gradually lost strength and his mind became unclear. The black-haired young man looked at the dark seabed around him. He suddenly felt that he might have to stay here forever. He was not afraid of death, but an unbearable unwillingness came with it. He really wanted to see her, even if it was just to say goodbye. What should he do? A small wish appeared in his heart. The black-haired young man pondered. The cold seawater made the surrounding temperature even colder. In the haze, Luoya seemed to have returned to the high platform in Rumen Forest. Under the starry sky, the golden butterflies competed with the moon. That was a butterfly as beautiful and noble as a golden rose. It was also the first gift that the young man gave to the girl that night. It was the beginning of their relationship and the crystallization of their bond. Right, she likes butterflies. The young man muttered to himself. He raised his hand. The golden light from when the butterflies were hatched shone again. In his cold body, the blood that seemed to have solidified began to circulate. The crown, origin substance that contained the young man's will began to tremble violently. Yes, this is the feeling. Luoya recalled the time when the butterfly monarch broke out of the cocoon and circulated his blood. Simulating the birth of the luminous butterfly did not require much curse power. At this time he also did not consume much. In the familiar darkness, golden butterflies spread their wings one after another. They gathered into a group of butterflies and circled around their master. There was light in the darkness again, but last time it was in the dark night. This time it was in the deep sea. Unknowingly, not only the butterflies, but also Luoya was dyed with a layer of light. The golden curse power spread like a rendering, causing the huge figure in the seabed to suddenly open his eyes. This is. The ancient god raised his head and looked at the fragment of the crown in disbelief. On the other side, the black-haired young man's face also showed a satisfied smile. Go. Chapter 175. Amidst the huge waves, the Luoya brand speedboat with billowing black smoke drifted across the sea, braving the wind and waves as it sped towards the location of the golden butterfly. The black-haired teenager recalled Paitila's imposing figure as he looked at the system's evaluation. He struggled to prop up his upper body and glanced at the center of the golden butterfly in pain. The moment he saw that Xia Luo was unharmed, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. Crack. A crisp sound came from his arm. He wasn't sure if it was because he was relieved, but after entering the undead state, Luoya's bones no longer felt the need to be stubborn. He propped his arm up and declared it useless. Caught off guard, The teenager plunged into the smoke and dust. After a while, he coughed twice and turned over. He stretched out his hand to straighten the bone, but after thinking about it he put it back. Forget it, the result of straightening it might not necessarily be the right one. It might even be crooked. Luoya, who had a new understanding of reality, sighed. Now there were still sporadic red curses on his body. He was in a state of deep undead state. It was normal for his arms and legs to be brittle, so breaking them was nothing. The black-haired teenager tried his best to deceive himself, forcing his thoughts to move in a positive direction. He lay on his back and looked at the blue sky after Paitila left. After experiencing the depression and despair brought by Mr. Darkness, the world now looked so beautiful in his eyes. The sun had risen, and the huge waves were gradually subsiding. The world had returned to its original state. Luoya felt joy in his heart under the vast sky. Although the process was tortuous and difficult, in the end he protected the people he wanted to protect. Although it was only a few days, he really missed home. If anyone tells me anything about ancient literature when I go back, I'll twist their brains out, except for Xia Luot. Secretly ruthless in his heart, Luoyu observed his surroundings, waiting for the black fog to bring him to meet up with the golden butterflies. However, after a few glances, the teenager's expression changed. Why did it feel wrong? Luoya looked at the golden light that was getting farther and farther away. He blinked and couldn't help but shake his head. Ha ha ha, how is that possible? Paitila is Mother Earth. How can she get lost? The black-haired youth chuckled. However, he soon discovered that he could no longer laugh. This was because the golden butterflies were getting further and further away. They were almost out of sight. The young man stared into the distance, dumbstruck. In the next moment he started cursing loudly. F***ck. There's something wrong with this car. Paitila? Are you kidding me? Paitila? Damn it. Luoya cursed the ancient god in his heart. The black-haired youth looked around and urgently thought of countermeasures. After thinking for a while, Luoya realized that there was only one thing he could do. He jumped out of the car and sank to the bottom. Thinking of this, Luoya couldn't help but feel sorrowful. Looking at the sea, he doubted his life. This is different from what we agreed on, right? Wouldn't they be sent to their allies if they were wounded in battle? The black-haired youth gritted his teeth and tried his best to flip over and dive into the sea. However, what he didn't expect was that what greeted him was not the cold sea, but a warm embrace. What are you doing all of a sudden, idiot? A tearful reprimand sounded in his ears. A familiar fragrance lingered at the tip of his nose. Luoya couldn't help but look up and saw Xia Luo with red eyes. Just as Luoya was about to jump out of the car, the reddish-brown-haired girl successfully arrived with the help of the golden soul. She caught the youth in the nick of time. Following closely behind was Isabela, who was slightly injured but almost exhausted of her curse power. Xia Luot. The black-haired youth looked at the girl who was close by. His lips moved, but he suddenly didn't know what to say. How did you find me? I thought you couldn't find me. It brought me here. The girl choked with sobs and pointed at the golden butterfly flapping its wings on her shoulder. Luoya was surprised when he saw this, but he immediately felt relieved. I see. Looks like the gift has arrived, the youth said with a chuckle. However, the girl hugging him couldn't laugh anymore. Xia Luot's eyes swept across Luoya's battered body. The tears that she tried to hold back finally flowed down her face. How could this be? You're injured so badly. If this continues, Xia Luot cried as she took out gems one by one. She pulled the trigger and the precious gems shattered and dissipated one by one. Healing and purification, stamina recovery, and mental stimulation. A series of buffs were cast on Luoya's body as if they were free. However, the effects were minimal. Chapter 176. You want to join the Society of Sages? That. Isabela, who was giving Xia Luot an emergency pre-marriage training, turned her head when she heard Luoya's question. Her expression was both gratified and a little troubled. Luoya, it's good that you have such an idea, but the Society of Sages has many requirements. Your strength may meet the requirements, but your source rank is still too far away. Isabella recalled the giant python that connected heaven and earth and swallowed one of the 6 disasters, Mr. Darkness. She couldn't help but have a completely different understanding of Luoya's strength. Although she didn't know how he formed a connection with that kind of god, there was no doubt that it was a huge power that the Society of Sages urgently needed. Sister Isabella, I understand the difficulties of the Society of Sages. Is there any other channel? No matter what, can you give me some clues? The black-haired young man said anxiously. Of course, he didn't really want to join the Society of Sages. After all, hundreds of years after Luoya and Xiaoluo existed, this mysterious society had long disappeared in history, leaving behind many mysteries. Isabella, this was the only member of the Society of Sages that Luoya had met so far, and she was obviously a core member. In a situation where there was no information at all, this was almost the only way he could get close to this mysterious organization. Looking at Luoya, who was asking for information, Xiaoluo blinked as if she understood something. She held Isabella's hand, and also asked for information. Sister Isabella, I also want to join the Twilight Society of Sages, but my strength is much weaker than Luoya's. Can you tell me who founded this organization? How can I join? The Twilight Society of Sages was founded at the end of the last era. I don't know who the founder is. Only the president should know. The president? That's right, it's Sage. This title is exclusive to the president of the Sage Society, and according to what the sage said in the past, there should be a succession of titles. Isabella crossed her arms and recalled the president's words. After a while, she repeated it for Luoya and Xiaoluo. The sage once said that the wise one of the past would be in an even more difficult situation. The enemy isn't just the mother goddess. Based on past experience, even he might be sacrificed. Luoya's eyes widened as he listened to Isabella's words. Once past experience, sacrifice. Putting these words together, it was obvious that the sage had changed, but he had no idea who it was. From the looks of it, he could only start by joining. Luoya, who had changed his direction, started asking about the way to join the society. Isabella thought for a while and pointed the way for the 2 children. Due to the nature of the Sage Society, there may be serious consequences if a traitor appears. Therefore, the examination to join the society is very strict. In the beginning, the Sage Society would take the initiative to look for you. But this method was too inefficient, so later on, there was a recommendation system. Recommendation? Sister Isabella, you can do that? I do have this authority, but to join the society, you need at least 2 recommendations. 2 referees? I thought you didn't know each other? Luoya was a little dumbfounded by Isabella's answer. According to the information he knew, the sages of the Sage Society basically didn't know each other, so how could he contact 2 members? Was it to discuss the recommendation together? That didn't seem very likely. After all, the recommendations were transparent. Wouldn't this be equivalent to exposing part of the recommendation's interpersonal relationships? What if the recommendation's true identity was found out? Luoya and Xiaoluo frowned as they thought about these problems. Isabella smiled when she saw this. I know that you have questions, but you're mistaken about one thing. Actually, we don't know the recommendations. You don't know them? Then how do you know the quality and strength of these new members? It's very simple. Because we have enough time and environment to observe them. Isabella looked at the 2 surprised children and hesitated for a moment. After thinking about it, she decided to reveal the answer. After all, both Luoya and Xiaoluo were highly talented. They would be more than qualified to join the Sage Society in the future. Not to mention that they were her and Vincent's relatives. The Academy in Bologna, the country of scholars. The Sage Society selects its talents from there. Her Majesty the Queen looked at the boys and girls, and decided to make things clear. Every year when they enter the Academy, the Sage Society will send different marks with blessings to the candidates. They will treat it as an ordinary protective curse vessel, but the members of the Sage Society will recognize it. They will observe everyone's performance and behavior, then make their own evaluations, and choose their own recommendations. The members who have the right to recommend will change every year, and the recommended will not join the society immediately after being selected. Instead, someone will be sent to persuade them when they are most likely to join the society. Some people may join the society after leaving the academy for a year, and some may join decades later. This ensures that our respective identities will not be discovered to the greatest extent. I see. Luoya and Xia Luo nodded after listening to Isha Beila's explanation. The Sage Society's system could be said to protect the members' respective interests to the greatest extent possible, but Luoya didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Chapter 177. They should arrive in a few days. On the official road leading to Akate City, a gorgeous carriage pulled by beautiful white horses was galloping on the road. Inside the carriage, a blonde girl looked at the snowy scenery outside the window and thought. She couldn't help but recall what happened 10 days ago. It was the 1007th year of the Third Era. This year's New Year was completely different for Nuar. Originally, the princess would spend every New Year's in Saint Lorraine. Attending the prayer meeting of the Holy See was the task of Nuar as the heir of the royal family. In some years, she even had to participate in a choir competition. But this year the princess, who had attracted a lot of attention, did not appear in the Saint Lorraine. Whether it was the palace banquet or the prayer meeting, Nuar did not attend either. It could be said that this was a huge blow to the princess's fan base in the Saint Lorraine. The direct impact was that the local sales of the Holy See video this year had plummeted. So where did Nuar spend this year's New Year? The answer was the Eastern Front Line. As the representative of the royal family and the future heir, the princess' personal visit to the front line during the New Year was undoubtedly a morale booster. It was also evidence that the royal family of Heidi Crete attached great importance to the situation at the front line. In fact, Nuar's arrival did indeed have a good effect. As the national idol of the theocracy of Saint Maester, Nuar was loved by almost all the frontline soldiers. This kind of love was not the love of a fan. Strictly speaking, it was more like love. They loved the princess, not because of her beauty, but because of her strength. As a leader, the public's evaluation of a leader may be affected by their appearance. But in the end, strength was the most important. Nuar was a leader who was currently strong and had terrifying potential in the future. She was highly regarded by the military. With the support of the masses, the support of the seniors, the noble status, and the talent and looks, it was impossible for others to not be convinced by such a combination. Especially when Nuar took the initiative to sing a requiem for the soldiers who had sacrificed themselves during the New Year's song. It won over the hearts of countless soldiers. These days, there were many generals who dared to lead their soldiers into battle. This was because the generals were usually powerful extraordinaries. Their role was to lead the charge and tear open the enemy's defenses. However, there were very few who could manage the situation until their deaths. In the theocracy, only the Akate family, who had a complete military system, and the royal family, Heidi Crete, were at the forefront. They were the only two families who received pensions. Therefore, there was a reason why there were strong and weak military forces. Just like the social animals in Luoya's previous life, the soldiers were not fools. They knew better than anyone else which side they should serve. The New Year's celebration went smoothly and successfully, and Princess Nuar's reputation rose to its highest point yet. However, as the princess herself, Nuar had another purpose for coming here. She was here to visit Kadia. There were two reasons for this. On the one hand, since Luoya could not come to the eastern region, it was necessary for her to visit the elders of her beloved's family. On the other hand, Nuar needed to find Kadia to discuss the matter of canceling Luoya's engagement. As the head of a family who pursued stability, Kadia, who believed in free love, stood on the side of Nuar and Ai Lizi. During the New Year, news of Luoya's old father personally taking part in the battle spread like wildfire, and he almost succeeded in helping the two of them solve a big problem. However, as the saying goes, when Nuar and Ai Lizi felt that everything was settled, and when Kadia slapped his thigh and thought that he had succeeded, Luoya was already reading a book hand in hand with the capital dog. Then came the tragic news. The plan was exposed, and the native Ai Lizi was defeated by the powerful dragon. She could only escape to the holy capital and urgently contact Nuair. To be honest, when she heard Ai Lizzie say that she did not manage to hold on, Miss Angel's mood collapsed, and she cursed on the spot. You came back just like that? Are you a waste? That's your home. Nuair was very excited at that time, but Ai Lizzie was even more excited in the Akot family's emergency communication system. Isn't it because your plan was exposed? That Xia Luo discovered some clues and told Big Bro. Now Big Bro Luo, you must hate me, hoo hoo hoo. The silver-haired girl began to wipe her tears as she spoke. Her aggrieved look made Nuair's head hurt, but after hearing Ai Lizzie's complaints, Miss Angel was speechless. As the saying goes, it's not that Ai Lizzie didn't work hard, it's that Xia Luo was too cunning. She used fate divination 3 times to confirm her love. Nuair was dumbfounded when he heard this. Moreover, in terms of identity, Xia Luo had a natural counter to Ai Lizzie. In Luoya's previous life, Xia Luo was an outsider's daughter-in-law. As for Ai Lizzie, she was the family's sister-in-law and adopted sister. Her identity was really difficult to deal with. If she made things difficult for Luoya, not only would it be rude, but it would also destroy Ai Lizzie's image in Luoya's heart. It might even push Luoya to the side of an enemy. Xia Luo didn't have any restrictions. Every day, she would be by Luoya's side, hugging Ai Lizzie. She would often make Ai Lizzie bite her handkerchief with tears in her eyes. Although Big Bro Luoya said that he only had a deal with that woman, and that once it ended, the engagement would be cancelled, but, heh, you believe that kind of nonsense? Nuair scoffed at Luoya's words. Perhaps the youth wasn't lying, but she felt that Xia Luo was lying. You've already used fate divination 3 times, and you're telling me that you're not moved and that you only had a deal with him? Do you think I'm an idiot? Miss Angel thought angrily. She felt that her intelligence had been insulted. Even if Xia Luo wasn't moved now, it didn't mean that she wouldn't be moved in the future. A single man and woman hugging, no matter how she thought about it, it was too dangerous. Thinking back to the red-haired girl she saw in Rouse, Nuair's heart sank like a weight. Xia Luo's noble Highland elf bloodline gave her an indescribable charm. And once the sorcerer clan's origin substance fell in love with someone, it would be very troublesome. Of course, Luoya's appearance wasn't bad either. They were of the same standard, but no matter how handsome the youth was, Nuair didn't think that Luoya would be able to make Xia Luo fall in love in a short period of time. After all, Xia Luo was the actual princess of Rouse, and she had seen too many handsome youths. Moreover, the sorcerer clan's females were very cautious when it came to marriage, and they were even somewhat conservative. Would they be able to get together in 10 days? How was that possible? Chapter 178. Find them. Find them for me. No matter what, we must find Miss and young Master Luoya. In the jewel necklace convoy, Gulacy looked at the empty room and loudly ordered. Serofia's elite guards immediately scattered in all directions. The black-haired maid recalled everything that had happened and felt her scalp go numb. As a full-time maid of the Serofia family, Gulacy had always been loyal to her duties. She was confident that she would never betray her mistrust, especially in the area of safety. She had deep feelings for Xia Luo, and could be said to be meticulous. She had to personally control every step of the way. Over the years, it wasn't that there weren't people who tried to cause trouble for the Serofia family. There were indeed people who wanted to take risks, but as soon as they got close to Xia Luo, they would mysteriously disappear, without exception. The strength of a level 3 source rank was no joke. As long as Gulacy was there, most of the assassins wouldn't live long enough to see Xia Luo. But today, Gulacy had miscalculated. The miss of the Serofia family, her most beloved master, had actually disappeared right under her nose. And it wasn't just Xia Luo who had disappeared, even the young master of the Akot family had disappeared with her. In Gulacy's mind, there were only 4 words that could describe this situation. The sky fell and the earth cracked. No, don't panic. There's still hope. The door of the jewel necklace hasn't been opened, and there's no sign of the curse nearby. They're definitely still in the carriage. The maid with wet eyes and trembling body pressed her temples and tried her best to think of the possible situation. Because in theory, the fluctuation of the curse and the effect of the curse happened at the same time. When the transfer curse was activated, the caster of the curse would leave, so the fluctuation of the curse couldn't be removed. There was only one possibility, and that was the curse released by the two people in the isolation room. Because Xia Luo and Luo Ye used the twin stone to go to the Austin Empire to participate in the luminous butterfly gathering in the Rumen forest, the two of them were unconscious. In this situation, they naturally needed extra protection. This isolation room was built for this purpose. Its material was special and could isolate curse power. Outsiders could not use curse power to enter, but the people inside could teleport. But the question was this even possible? Gu Lacey estimated that Luo Ye's strength was probably at source level 5. This level was far from being able to use a transfer spell involving space. He could only use a special curse vessel. However, because Xia Luo designed a dress for Luo Ye, the young master of the Akot family could be said to be naked. He brought nothing except a set of clothes. Even if the Akot family is an adept family, do you think you can kidnap someone out of thin air? Gu Lacey didn't believe that there was such a bizarre thing in this world. And what's the point? Although it was just a transaction, Luo Ye was now Xia Luo's fiancé. In this case, even if he wanted to do something to Miss Gu Lacey had no right to stop him as a servant, so there was no need to kidnap him. Of course, there was another possibility, that was Xia Luo kidnapped Luo Ye, but for this, how is it possible? Miss is such an elegant and skillful lady. How can she kidnap a man? It's impossible in the past, impossible now, and even more impossible in the future. The black-haired maid shook her head. After thinking for a while, the more she thought, the more confused she became. She looked down at the pendant in her arms. The blood-colored pendant was shining under the light, and there was nothing unusual. Xia Luo's life wasn't in danger. This was the only good news she could be sure of, but it didn't mean that there wouldn't be any danger in the future. There was another problem, and that was she didn't know about Luo Ye's situation. It hadn't been long since the incident happened, so everything was still fine. After a while, the Akot family would come looking for Luo Ye. What could Gu Lacey give them? This was the Akot mansion in the main city of the Akot family within the Akot family's territory. The courtyard was filled with hundreds of guards. Yet the Sorofia family had lost the only son of the Akot family. If the Akot family found out about this, Grace and the others wouldn't be able to explain themselves no matter how many mouths they had. The Akot family wasn't a large and prosperous family, like the Sorofia family. In this generation, Luo Ye was the only child. Moreover, Luo Ye was the acting lord of the territory at the age of 10. He was the genius who led the Akot family's development by leaps and bounds. If Sorofia family couldn't find Luo Ye by today, this matter would definitely escalate to the heavens. Gu Lacey was anxious, but what she didn't expect was that there was a sudden commotion in the house. The moment the fluctuation of the curse power appeared, all the transcendents present were stunned. Then they all looked at the door. Under dozens of gazes, Gu Lacey suddenly turned around, kicked the door open and rushed in. "Miss!" Gu Lacey shouted as she entered the room. She found that there were two figures in the originally empty room. Xia Luo's eyelids moved as the maid shouted. After a while, he gently opened his eyes. "This place is..." Xia Luo looked at the familiar ceiling of the gem necklace team's isolation room. She was stunned for a moment like a person who had just woken up, but then her eyes widened. She remembered what Luo Ye said before she fainted. "We're back?" The red-haired girl just came back to her senses when Gu Lacey rushed over. The black-haired maid looked at the exhausted girl after the battle, and released a curse to check the condition of Xia Luo's body. However, she didn't expect that before her curse was ready, her miss had already struggled to get up. "Luo Ye." Charlotte, who was now fully awake, looked at the unconscious youth beside her. Ignoring Grace, she immediately pounced towards him. As the young lady rushed to the youth's side, she remembered Isabella's words and hurriedly called out. Chapter 179. In the middle of the night, Luo Ye woke up from his sleep. At the beginning of his awakening, Luoya's consciousness was still very fuzzy. He felt that his body was very heavy and very cold. His undead ability blocked his sense of pain, so he didn't feel any pain. However, he was somewhat numb to his body. Therefore, when Luoya was unconscious, his sense of touch wasn't very sensitive. But even so, Luoya still felt a little strange. Every time the young man felt a bone-chilling cold and couldn't wake up, as if he was about to fall into the abyss, his lips would feel a little smooth and moist. Occasionally, Luoya would also smell a faint fragrance. Then, a surge of curse power would flow into his body like warm water, helping him suppress the bone-chilling cold. This scene repeated at least 10 times while he was unconscious. Every time, he would fall asleep again. In the end, his body even remembered this feeling. When the cold reached its peak, it would even cooperate with the cold reflexively. The unconscious Luoya naturally didn't know that he had unknowingly turned into someone else's shape. But strictly speaking, although the young man was fighting unconsciously, he wasn't at a disadvantage. Because every time he cooperated unconsciously, the young girl would be tormented until she was weak and boneless. After another strange touch on his lips, Luoya, whose body was much colder than before, finally regained consciousness. For the first time in a day, he opened his eyes. The moment he opened his eyes, he saw a sky full of stars, or rather, an artificial sky. Gems, all gems, colorful and dazzling. From the white crystal, which was an expensive decorative material, to the purple crystal, which was worth far more than gold. Hundreds and thousands of high-priced gems were inlaid on the ceiling, forming a galaxy. Under the sparkling light of this galaxy, Luoya felt as if his body had received some kind of blessing. He thought for a moment, and understood that this must be the work of the Sorofia family. It's really beautiful. The young man muttered his thoughts. After a while, Xia Luot, who was drinking tea to cool down, suddenly turned her head. Luoya, you're finally awake. The excited young lady rushed to the bed and grabbed the black-haired young man's hand with trembling hands. Her eyes were filled with tears. Seeing Xia Luot, who was obviously much healthier than him, Luoya finally felt relieved. Xia Luot, are you all right? I'm fine. Speaking of which, shouldn't I be the one saying that? You're the one who's not fine. Under the moonlight, the lovely and moving Miss was about to cry as she spoke. Luoya smiled bitterly and hurriedly waved his hand. No. Actually, I'm fine. It's not that serious. Luoya recalled the fragmentary memories she had when she was unconscious. She blinked as if she had recalled something. She looked at the reddish-brown-haired girl and asked casually, by the way, I don't know if it's just my imagination, but when I'm asleep, I occasionally feel a strange sensation on my mouth. Huh. As soon as Luoya spoke, the Miss body suddenly stopped moving. Under the moonlight, Xia Luot's face quickly turned red, but after a short moment, she forced herself to return to normal. It's a thermometer. I added a thermometer. Oh, I see. No wonder. Hearing Xia Luot's reply, the young man's mind was still in a numb state. Hearing her words, he nodded. In this world, thermometers were hung by the mouth. Luoya had used it before. The last time was when he cooperated with Anna to pretend to be sick. Previously, when he was unconscious, Xia Luot seemed to be normal when she took his temperature. I'll have to trouble you. But please take my temperature. The thermometer is probably frozen. No, it's still quite hot after taking it. Miss Thermometer said as she felt her heartbeat. She stared at Luoya's lips and slightly tilted her eyes. Due to the side effects of the skill, the young man's brain wasn't too bright. He turned his head to look out the window and suddenly seemed a little confused. The scenery outside was moving. Did that mean the carriage was moving? What's going on? Xia Luot, shouldn't we be in the mansion? Where are we going? Look at the stars. We're going to look at the stars. Huh? Luoya asked in a daze. Xia Luot saw this and felt guilty, but she explained seriously. Your body's condition is not good now. You need to rest. Akate City is too noisy. We need to go to a quieter place. Oh, I see. That's fine. Chapter 180. The next morning, Luoya woke up to the girl's breathing. It was a warm, light, and fragrant breath on his neck. It was a little itchy, but it was also a little exciting. It was like a strand of cat's tail grass, constantly teasing the boy's muddled consciousness. Under this teasing, Luoya successfully came ashore and woke up. The moment Luoya opened his eyes, he saw a delicate and beautiful little princess. Xia Luo's body was currently slanted beside the black-haired boy. The two of them were sharing a bed. The girl's reddish-brown hair was scattered on the bed, and under the faint light, it formed a sharp contrast with her fair skin. Her noble temperament, coupled with her princess-like white pajamas, gave Luoya the illusion that he was looking at a sleeping beauty. Why is she here? The moment he saw Xia Luo, Luoya's brain temporarily stopped working. To be honest, this was the nth time that Luoya had slept with a girl. But previously, it all belonged to one person, and that was Ai Lizzie. Rather than saying that they slept together, it was more like sleeping with someone to take care of a child. But Xia Luo was obviously not in this situation. Ah, right, it was Isha Bela's words about sleeping with someone. He didn't expect Xia Luo to actually take it seriously. Luoya smiled bitterly as he thought of this. He secretly sighed at how obedient Xia Luo was in front of the ancestors. She was clearly very mischievous when interacting with him before. This contrast was really quite big, but she was really beautiful. The black-haired boy looked at the pretty face that was more than 10 centimeters away from him, and couldn't help but sigh. Normally, people couldn't withstand close observation, but this was completely ineffective on Xia Luo. The noble young lady was not only as perfect as a story from afar, but when played with, she was probably even more. Ahem. After coughing twice, Luoya blushed and turned her head away. She felt a little ashamed of her own thoughts. Although it was the ancestors' order, Xia Luo had abandoned her feminine modesty to share the bed with him in order to save him. At this time, as the one being saved, it would be rude to have any evil thoughts. Mr. Luoya blamed himself in his heart, but his light cough caused Xia Luo to gradually wake up. The reddish-brown-haired girl opened her eyes, and the moment her blurred gaze met Luoya's, she became completely awake. Looking at the young man whose eyes met hers, Xia Luo winked playfully and revealed a teasing smile. Mr. Luoya, are you peeping at my sleeping face? No, I just woke up too. The young man explained with a guilty conscience, but Xia Luo didn't care. She looked at Luoya, got up, and approached him. As the young man's voice became softer and softer, she leaned over and kissed him gently on the cheek. Good morning, my dear. In the gentle whisper, Luoya was stunned. Xia Luo gently wrapped her arms around the young man's neck. Her luxurious body was only separated by a thin layer of pajamas, and her seductive body fragrance was like an aphrodisiac, causing Luoya's heartbeat to soar. What's going on? Luoya's brain quickly overheated. At the same time, he suddenly remembered something. The young man's gaze turned to the system, and his pupils suddenly shrank when he saw the record. Favorability plus 80,000. Rich women are not only rich, but also have a lot of favorability? Lying under the starry sky ceiling in Xia Luo's bedroom, Luoya thought to himself. He felt that things might be a little serious. 80,000 favorability. This was something Luoya had never seen before. It was different from the usual favorability. Such a large amount of favorability basically represented a substantial change in the relationship between two people. For example, the Ai Lizzie and Nua Iyer in the past were the best examples of this situation. But 80,000, isn't this a little too much? Although I do want to increase Xia Luo's favorability, but 80,000. The black-haired young man looked at the young lady who was mischievously poking his cheek, and felt that this wave of poking was a little too forceful. The suspension bridge effect was a situation where people mistook it for love during a special crisis. The accelerated heartbeat due to the danger would cause a young girl to mistake it for the person who was protecting her and going through the crisis with her, thus causing her to fall in love. The suspension bridge effect was a relatively common theory in Luoya's previous world. The people of this world naturally didn't know about it, but if one were to ask whether Xia Luo became like this because of the suspension bridge effect, Luoya felt that this was definitely a factor, but it should also be because of their marriage and Isabella. However, the suspension bridge effect would generally fade over time, so it didn't seem to be too much of a worry. Dear, What do you want to eat for breakfast? Anything. In the room, the young lady held her cheek with one hand and mischievously played on Luo Ye's face with the other. Her slender white legs kicked back and forth on the bed in a good mood. The smile on her face was filled with doting. Her innocent and gentle appearance had a unique charm of a young wife, causing Luo Ye's heart to palpitate. What's going on? Are you the wife that the country owes me? F***ck. Seems like it. Chapter 181. At the breakfast table, a black-haired youth listened to the music in his ears and looked at the artwork on the walls. His eyes were filled with doubts about life and self-doubt. For so many years, although Luo Ye had always flaunted himself as an honest, friendly, and helpful person, he knew that a truly good person would not be able to mix well in the noble circle. However, if he wanted to benefit the group, he could not be a maverick. So what should he do? The answer was to put on an act. In terms of acting, Luo Ye's foundation was very solid. Whether it was a righteous messenger or a treacherous merchant, Luo Ye could act out them vividly. However, his confidence in acting met with a Waterloo here. Just now, on Xia Luo's princess bed, Luo Ye witnessed Miss Merchant's unique skill in acting for the first time in a long time. The red-haired girl did not give Luo Ye any chance at all. If he asked, she would say that she would complete the commission and go home to get married. If he asked again, her eyes would be filled with tears. Dear, can you not make such bad jokes in the future? No, you should know that our marriage contract was signed by our ancestors 100 years ago. It is sacred and traditional. How can I use it to make a deal? When the red-haired girl wiped her tears and said this, Luo Ye felt as if there were tens of thousands of mythical beasts galloping through his heart. He looked at the girl who had talked terms with him in the Akat mansion, and felt as if he had transmigrated. No, how could it be? The youth who was almost fooled by Xia Luo thought so, and quickly shook his head to calm himself down. He could not help but admire this girl's powerful brainwashing ability. Xia Luo did not admit to it, and Luo Ye could not do anything. After all, the terms were mutually beneficial. Luo Ye did not think that there was any possibility of failure. Naturally, there was no paper document. It was a standard case of dead men telling no tales. Thinking of this, the young man shook his head and decided to look at something more meaningful, such as his own system. This trip to the historical fragment was indeed very dangerous. Luo Ye and Xia Luo experienced more than one life and death crisis, but the rewards were also very generous. The most obvious reward was the frozen touch skill, but there were actually other rewards. Rating: Perfect 115. Bloodline upgrade successful. You have received Bloodline, King Selection Blood Silver. The Ancient Contract, the Broken Crown, the King is gone. The glory and prosperity are scattered. Your hands pick up the dust, surpass the boundary, and return the truth. When Luo Ye saw this new line of system introduction, he almost reflexively thought of the scene where Pei Tila absorbed the golden curse power and soared into the sky underwater. At that time, Luo Ye's curse power had many suspicious points. It was obviously abnormal, and the new ability of this new bloodline seemed to be the only clue. It still doesn't sound human. Looking at this abstract introduction for a while, Luo Ye could only helplessly shake his head. He recalled the situation at that time and felt that it was very likely to be an enhanced skill. But as for how to do it, rub butterflies? No way, not to mention whether it was troublesome or not. It was too inappropriate for a man to rub butterflies for no reason. Luo Ye looked at his broken body and sighed. It would probably be a long time before he could personally practice it. After all, many bloodline abilities had side effects. If he accidentally killed himself in practice, it would be an unprecedented idiotic behavior. But in any case, the appearance of a new bloodline ability made Luo Ye very excited. The ability wouldn't grow legs and run away on its own. Luo Ye grasped it was only a matter of time. Besides the ability, there was actually a breakthrough that was also very exciting, and that was the bloodline upgrade to silver. Silver bloodline and bronze bloodline. Although there was only a difference of one stage, the number of people who had it decreased exponentially. Although bronze bloodline appeared in ordinary extraordinary families, they would also pay attention to it, but they wouldn't use all their resources to cultivate it. But if a silver bloodline fell from the sky, it would be a different story. Silver bloodline basically represented the ticket to becoming a high-level extraordinary. Source rank 3 was a huge hurdle that all extraordinary had to face. Countless praise geniuses rushed all the way to source rank 3, but then wasted their lives without making any progress. But silver bloodline was different. The degree of mutation of their body was much higher than that of bronze bloodline. As long as they worked hard, it wouldn't be difficult for them to break through. Because of this, once a family had a silver bloodline, it was equivalent to winning the lottery. As long as there were no accidents, there would definitely be a powerhouse above source rank 3 in the next few decades. This basically represented the prosperity of the family. So when dealing with silver bloodline, extraordinary families would spend a lot of money. As long as they didn't die, they would spend as much as they could. Luoya had obtained a lot of things from this historical fragment. The frozen touch skill was very powerful, and the new effect of the king's chosen blood was also very amazing. But if he had to say what he valued the most, it would be the simplest silver bloodline. This was because only with the silver bloodline could Luoya truly stand on the same starting line as geniuses like Nuwa Iyer and Ai Lizi. For a long time, although Luoya's strength had always been ahead of the girls in one-wave burst, his foundation was actually worse than them. The talent of Nuwa Iyer and the others was different from Luoya's. Instead of saying that Luoya had talent, it was more like looking for opportunities. All the gains depended on oneself. On the other hand, Nuwa Iyer and the others were more like geniuses. They could level up just by breathing. Because of this, Gulandair and Paytila would always talk about those dirty topics. This was because Nuwa Iyer and the others were rare geniuses, even in the eyes of the ancient gods. Of course, they were the best choice to continue the bloodline. Now, after going through so many hardships, Luoya had finally turned from a bicycle into a motorcycle. This kind of satisfaction suddenly faded away the little inferiority he had buried in the depths of his heart for a long time. It made him happy. The youth who was in a good mood leaned back on the chair and sighed. He turned his head to look at the bright sunshine outside the window. He suddenly felt that the world had never been so beautiful before. Chapter 182. They finally arrived. In front of the Akot family's mansion, Nuwa Iyer Heathcliff was sitting in a luxurious carriage pulled by a frostwing horse. Looking ahead, she let out a sigh of relief. It had been more than a week since she received the message from Ai Lizi in the eastern region. During this week, Nuwa Iyer had traveled a long way and finally arrived at the Akot family's mansion. Recalling the first time she entered the Akot family's mansion a few years ago, Nuwa Iyer couldn't help but sigh. Who would have thought that a simple visit back then would lead her to meet a strange young man who completely understood her XP? Since then, the two of them had been in constant contact, confronting each other, going through crises and supporting each other. Now, they had become two people who couldn't live without each other. Ahem. Well, Luoya was still stubbornly resisting her XP, but Nuwa Iyer believed that under her persuasion, Luoya would be willing to cooperate with her one day. Yes, Nuwa Iyer was full of confidence because she and Luoya had experienced life and death together. Although they were independent and didn't rely on each other, if either one of them had a problem, the other would immediately rush to their aid. This was because their hearts were united. Therefore, Nuwa Iyer was full of confidence in this battle. Xia Luo was just a fiancé in name. So what if she stayed in the Akot family's mansion for half a month? Had she ever fought alongside Luoya before? Was there a trust that transcended life and death? Was there a love that threw away all the fame and status and only looked at it from the perspective of a person? Thinking of this, Miss Angel revealed a proud smile and flicked her hair. The answer had already appeared in her heart. How could she? She was nothing more than a pitiful person who held on to the marriage contract as her last weapon. As long as she didn't have that marriage contract, she wouldn't be able to do anything. A smile appeared on Miss Angel's face. She already had a plan in her mind. While she was thinking, the gate of Akot's house was getting closer and closer. Familiar scenery and familiar buildings. The servants of the Akot family welcomed her in a timely manner. About 100 meters away, The Akat family's courtyard was already open for the princess. Nuwa Iyer sat in the car and decided to do some inappropriate intimate actions when he saw Luoya later. Nuwa Iyer intended to quickly enter the battlefield. The holidays in the eastern region were not long, and Nuwa Iyer did not have much time. She had to quickly and neatly get rid of Xiaoluot, and then return to the battlefield with peace of mind. In order to resist foreign aggression, one must first pacify internal affairs. However, to her surprise, things didn't seem to go according to her plan. Someone did come out to greet them, but the person leading them was Anna. Luoya and Xiaoluot were nowhere to be seen. What's going on? As a guest, Xiaoluot might not be able to greet them in front of the Akat family's gate. But what about Luoya? How could he not come out? Nuwa Iyer's blue eyes widened. Before her brain could react, the carriage had already stopped in front of the gate. In front of the carriage, Anna's face was barely maintaining a smile, but the worry in her eyes was almost overflowing. Recently, because of the pressure from the current head of the family, Kadia, Anna had cooperated with Ai Lizzie and Nuwa Iyer's killing operation. Although the result was completely counterproductive, it had to be said that this time, as Luoya's personal maid, Anna felt a lot of guilt. Before Luoya reached adulthood, which was 14 years old, the command and control of the personal maid position was in the hands of the head of the family, Kadia. So at least for now, Anna had to obey the orders of the head of the family, Kadia. Otherwise, it would be the same as violating the military rules. She would be punished, and it was very likely that she would be removed from her position and completely leave the little master that she had watched grow up. But it had to be said that this order put Anna in a dilemma. Even if Luoya didn't say anything, Anna's guilt and worry didn't stop. Is young master hating me? Every time Anna thought of this matter, she felt as though she was a mother who was hated by her child, or an elder sister who was hated by her younger brother. She couldn't sleep well night after night. In fact, Luoya didn't mean it at all. He was just being taken care of by a rich woman and didn't have time to see Anna. Because of this guilt, Anna didn't raise any doubts when Luoya went to have dinner with Xiaoluot on the carriage 3 days ago. After that, they went out of the city to enjoy the scenery. But gradually, Anna realized that something was wrong. Although Luoya and Xiaoluot's journey would be reported every day by Sophia's messenger, they had traveled further and further for 3 consecutive days. The journey was delayed again and again. Soon, they had arrived in the southern region and were heading straight for the Warren Mountain Range, which was the border between the two families. If Luoya was a dissolute young master who didn't care about anything in pursuit of love, it would be fine. But the reality was obviously not like that. According to Anna's observation, although Luoya was attracted to Xiaoluot, he didn't have any special feelings for her. Under such circumstances, why would her cautious young master leave without saying goodbye, or bringing along guards for so long? Anna was deeply suspicious of this, but she didn't have any way to contact him. Plus, she was Sophia's betrothed, so she couldn't say anything. Long time no see, Anna. Where's Luoya? Nuwa Iyer, who had alighted from the carriage, immediately asked Luoya's personal maid. Anna's smile froze and she couldn't help but feel anxious. Should I help young master cover up or tell her the truth? After hesitating for a moment, Anna decided to prioritize her young master's safety. She told her the truth and the uneasiness in her heart. As for Nuwa Iyer's reaction, Miss Angel was dumbfounded. She had already prepared her ultimate move, but in the end, Luoya and Xiaoluot were gone. Not only that, they were gone for 3 days. 3 days. What kind of dinner could last for 3 days? Miss Angel clenched her fists in anger. But after thinking about it carefully, she felt that it was indeed as Anna said. There was a strong sense of strangeness. Wait, did he bring the holy sword? Chapter 183. Luoya felt that he had been sleeping a little too much recently. Ever since his return, Luoya's body had accumulated side effects that had been affecting his condition. One was that he was often sleepy, and the other was that his body was weak when he was awake. He had completely turned into a weak and beautiful young man, but under the protection of Xiaoluot, this kind of thing didn't really matter. who could bully him when he was with Miss Luot every day. The black-haired young man shook his head after waking up and reached out to touch his lips. The slight feeling of discomfort when he was in a hazy state of consciousness still lingered. She must have taken his temperature again. Sigh, it's really hard on Xia Luot. The young man let out a sigh. He was touched by the young girl who always cared about his body. Perhaps only Xia Luot could persist in doing this kind of thing that didn't have any benefits. While thanking the selfless young girl in his heart, Luoya couldn't help but think about his current financial situation. That day at breakfast, Luoya asked Xia Luot to settle the balance, but it was said that it was a joint property. Asking for this sum of money was equivalent to admitting that they were husband and wife. This was Xia Luot's unspoken words. However, in the face of such a predicament, Luoya didn't shrink back. Instead, he faced the difficulties head-on. Do you think this little trick can stop my determination to ask for money? Haha, too naive. If it was the old debt from before, Luoya might have hesitated a little. However, this new loan to buy Freezing Touch was a terrible loan. 10% every month. He was dumbfounded, okay? Apart from Soroya, who didn't care about money at all, who could afford it? And in the end, Freezing Touch wasn't only beneficial to Luoya. This skill killed the puppet master Daoj Leisai and saved Xia Luot's life. A skill that saved a life. With Xia Luot's net worth, 300,000 gold coins was honestly a bit too cheap. This amount of money probably couldn't even buy a few strands of Miss Luot's hair. In the end, Luoya chose to absorb Freezing Touch in order to survive with Xia Luot. Otherwise, with Luoya's personality, he wouldn't necessarily accept a skill like Freezing Touch that came from one of the 6 disasters. The price of extraordinary power was always a problem that extraordinary people had to consider. Ordinary extraordinary people often ignored this in pursuit of power, but the wizard family Akat was the most extraordinary family members, and Luoya was even more. Between risk and benefits, he would usually choose to prioritize risk. In order to solve the inhumane system, Luoya decided to be shameless, but he didn't expect Xia Luot to be so happy. She promised to let Luoya use the money as he wished after settling down. Luoya smiled and didn't take it too seriously. As Soroya's daughter, Xia Luot had a lot of wealth under her control. How could she let him control it all? But with this sentence, it shouldn't be difficult to settle the bill. So Luoya didn't continue to ask. Dear, you're awake? Xia Luot, who heard the sound and entered the room, saw Luoya get up from the bed and hurried over. With the girl's help, the youth moved out of the soft princess bed and sat in a wheelchair. Yes, this was Luoya's current treatment. Due to the exhaustion of life and the high level of immortality, Luoya's body was very weak. It was very difficult to stand and walk, and he might even break a bone. Helpless, he could only sit in a wheelchair. The wheels turned. This time, Luoya arrived at the gem necklace garden. Various potted plants released oxygen under the transparent ceiling, making Luoya, who was sitting beside a small round table, feel relaxed. Under the sunlight, Xia Luot's delicate face added a bit of charm. Her chair was still beside Luoya today, and she was gently cutting desserts for the youth. I say, we haven't arrived yet? I slept too much, so I don't know the time, but we've been walking for at least 3 or 4 days, right? Beautiful scenery takes time. This is normal, right? Come on. Luoya looked at the fork in front of him and was speechless. As an old feeding worker, Luoya had fed Ai Lizzie countless times, but being fed by Xia Luot was the first. The first time he was fed was in the morning. At that time, Luoya was even weaker than he was now. His hands had no strength at all, and he couldn't hold the silver spoon steadily. For a moment he was in a dilemma at the dining table. Sensing the youth's awkwardness, the girl didn't say anything. She just silently pulled the plate over, and under Luoya's surprised gaze, she scooped up some soup with a smile and brought it to his mouth. Luoya remembered the gentle and virtuous appearance of the reddish-brown-haired girl. When Luoya helplessly sucked on the spoon, the girl's bright smile made his heart beat faster. But in the end, that was a few days ago. Now Luoya's condition was better. At least he could hold the knife steadily, so he tried to take back the initiative. I'll do it myself. No. Chapter 184. How is the natural scenery of Akkot? As the acting lord for so many years, Luoya didn't know much about it. The current transportation of Xia wasn't developed, and Akkot was quite big. Even with the fastest horses and the best carriages, it would take more than 10 days to travel from the north to the south. This was after Luoya repaired the roads. In the past, when the roads weren't smooth, it was normal to not be able to travel for a month due to taking detours and resting. In this kind of situation, all the rulers would command from the political and economic center, which was the most efficient. As for a certain Qianlong old man in his previous life going to Jiangnan, only Lord He, who owned a bank, would be able to handle this master. So even though Luoya was the acting lord of Akkot, the scenery and local snacks under his rule weren't something that Luoya could appreciate and taste. It was better to say that the daily political affairs during the development period made him quite busy. In the future, when the territory settled down, Luoya would go out and travel. This was the goal that Luoya worked hard for. He hoped that when he traveled around Akkot, he wouldn't see the hardships of the people, but the prosperity and well-being of the people. But this time, Xia Luo's recuperation trip seemed to have made him experience it in advance. Oh, is this the specialty nut wine of the south? The taste is really unique. After taking a sip of the liquid in the cup, Luoya couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. The red-haired girl beside him sniffed the wine lightly, and was also surprised by the strong nut aroma. It's really a unique taste. What's added in it? I remember it's a specialty nut. I think it's called Pamela, which means can't bite in the local dialect. Can't bite. Pfft, what's that? Xia Luo listened to Luoya's introduction and couldn't help but laugh. She took a sip of the wine and couldn't help but widen her eyes. It's so sweet. Yeah, I knew you would like it. The black-haired boy leaned on the wheelchair and smiled helplessly at the sweet lover. Xia Luo couldn't help but take another sip. It's really sweet. Why? Although this fruit is very hard, it has a lot of sugar content. No, it should be because it has too much sugar content. If it doesn't become harder, it will be eaten by wild beasts. Also, the wine you're drinking now is an improved version. Improved model? Well, this fruit itself has a strange taste. In order to cover this taste, raisins were added when brewing it. That's why it is so sweet, Luoya said as she shook the pale yellow liquid in her hand. Xia Luo took another sip. The sweet taste made her squint her eyes slightly. Speaking of which, why do you know so much? Of course I do. This is a key development project in Akkot territory. It's one of the first products promoted by the Poverty Alleviation Task Force in the South. I've read the information and stamped it. By the way, was it your idea to help the poor? Not really. Actually, I learned it from an ancient country with 5,000 years of history. I see. But it's really a unique way of thinking. Xia Luo thought of Luoya's library of information and nodded. Then she thought for a while and asked in confusion. But how does Akkot territory help the poor? Do you mean giving money? Giving money? Although there is such a method, it doesn't work well in most cases. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. This was a very philosophical ancient saying in the previous world. Luoya deeply agreed with it. Akkot territory's poverty alleviation is mainly to make the information as fair as possible and explore the characteristics of each place. Information. Xia Luo blinked in confusion. Luoya turned the wheelchair around and looked at the lively village behind him because of the arrival of Xia Luo's team. How many people in this village have gone out and seen the wide world, do you think? This probably not many. And since they have gone out, it's rare to come back to a mountain village like this. Chapter 185. In front of the jewel necklace convoy, the blonde girl looked at the row of Sorofia's staff and silently waited for the results of the search. Since stopping the convoy until now, Nua Ayer had talked with Gulacy several times. From the maid's response, there was no doubt that Nua Ayer's actions were predicted. Charlotte Sorofia, a young girl who was able to take care of Sorofia's business in the central area of Rosetta City since she was a child, was not only talented, but also intelligent. This incident was a good example. This time, Charlotte had the upper hand from the very beginning. Noelle and the Akate family were completely led by someone else, and there was no good way to deal with it. From the moment they started chasing after Luoya, they had to focus on their journey. Nua Air had guessed that the jewel necklace convoy was a bait, but so what if she guessed it? Did she have the time to sweep the area with a large group of people? No, and Nua Air believed that once she did that, the jewel necklace convoy would definitely rush out of the border at full speed. She would not be able to catch up. Your Highness, we have searched everything. Luoya-sama is not in the convoy. The soldiers reported. As expected, there was no trace of the two people in the convoy. Nua Air was silent for a while. She could only give an order with difficulty. Send an order to all the garrison troops and militia groups in Akat City. From 3 days ago, all outsiders must be interrogated. Once suspicious people are found, they must be detained immediately. Collect clues from the nearby residents. Once there is reliable information, there will be a reward. After gritting his teeth and giving the order, Noelle looked at the warriors of the Akat family and asked with some difficulty, "What's the matter?" "There are a few villages nearby, within a day's journey." "Oh, within a day there should be 3. Well, now our team will be divided into 4 groups. The first 3 groups will spread out and search the 3 nearby villages. Once there is a situation, immediately send someone to contact them. The last group will take the Rosetta convoy and find a place to settle down. Before this matter is over, no one is allowed to leave." Under Noelle's command, the soldiers of Akat Hill moved quickly. The 2 captains led their men to the farthest, most remote village that was hard to find. Noelle, on the other hand, went to the village that was relatively easy to reach. According to the soldiers, it was a village that was not very developed, but it had a very unique specialty wine. Her Royal Highness and her entourage rushed to the small village before noon. The moment she looked down at the village from the top of the hill, Noelle's blue eyes narrowed. She, who was very observant, noticed something unusual. The snow on the road leading to the village was swept too well. It was wide enough for 2 carriages to travel side by side. Normally, there would not be much activity in a small village like this in winter. Even if there was a hunt, there would only be a dozen people leaving on foot. After all, the snow would hinder the carriages from moving forward. The animals pulling the carriages also needed to eat, so it was better not to bring them along. In order to save food during winter, most people would not move much except for sex at night. This was especially true for a small village like this that did not have much activity. However, such a village was able to sweep the snow on the official road so cleanly. Not only did it sweep the snow, but it was also as wide as 2 carriages. There is a problem. Miss Angel looked at the scene around the village, and her heart beat faster. She did not expect that the search that was just a struggle before death would actually yield results. After discovering the problem, she decisively led her troops and rushed down. She saw an old woman trembling as she walked out of the door to get some firewood. Nua Air, who discovered the villagers, did not delay. She jumped down from her horse when she was still a dozen meters away. Her wings of light flashed, and the surging curse power carried her nimble body to the front of the wooden house. The old woman was so shocked that the firewood in her hand fell to the ground. "Old woman, don't panic. I am the commander of Akat. I want to ask you a few questions." Looking at the trembling old woman, Nua Air explained helplessly. These old people in the village had never left the village in their lives. They did not know anything about angels or Heathcliff. She could only cover it up with her identity as a soldier of Akat. Under Nua Air's comforting words, the old woman was still panicking. However, she seemed to have realized that the person in front of her was a noble person. Her body no longer trembled, but she was obviously stuttering when she spoke. She did not dare to raise her head. Seeing this, the princess felt helpless and could only ask the question directly. "There should be outsiders in the village these 2 days, right? Old woman, can you tell me what they look like and where they are?" Miss Angel asked in a gentle tone. Hearing this, the old woman was stunned for a moment, and immediately nodded. Yes, there are outsiders. She is a lady from a rich family. She has a big carriage. Oh yes, there are many attendants. The old woman said hurriedly. She gestured the size of the carriage with her hands. Obviously, she had a deep impression of it. Nua Iyer was excited and quickly asked for more details. You mean the leader is a reddish-brown-haired girl, and there is a black-haired boy in the team? Yes, the boy is in a wheelchair. It seems that his legs are inconvenient. Oh yes, they also bought a lot of wine. Hearing that Luo Iyer was injured, Nua Iyer's body trembled. She was shocked and angry at the same time. She clenched her fist and tried to ask again calmly. I understand. Then where did they go? That way. They went from the eastern mountain road to the border. They said that they were going to see some snow. We tried to persuade them that there are more wolves there and that the western mountain road is better, but they didn't listen. The old woman frowned and tried to shift the blame. Obviously, she thought that Nua Iyer was one of the young nobles. Miss Angel saw this and did not explain. She immediately jumped on her horse and chased after them. As expected, she found traces of a large group of people. At the entrance of the village, the white-haired old woman looked at Nua Iyer and the group of people who were rushing to the east. After a long time, she shook her head and walked back into the house. The moment she closed the door, her body began to twist and flicker. Her white hair disappeared and turned into reddish-brown. Her hunched body also turned into a slender waist. Chapter 186. The mountain roads in Akkad were quite rugged. Luoya couldn't help but think as she sat in the slightly trembling carriage and looked at the setting sun in the distance. It had been more than 2 hours since they left the village with Pamela Wine. In addition to the official road, there were 2 mountain roads in the village that led to the border of the Warren Mountain Range. One was rugged to the east, and the other was smooth to the west. Luoya and the others chose the western road. It was against common sense to travel at sunset, but Xia Luo brought Luoya here to see the starry sky above the mountains, so it was fine to leave at dusk. However, Luoya found something strange. Do we need to be in such a hurry? Didn't you mobilize the people in the village to go hunting on the eastern front? We've already given the money to the prey, and you don't want it anymore? Yes, I wanted to hold a bonfire banquet, but there isn't much fuel in the village in winter, so I couldn't hold it. Ah, that's true. Luoya nodded in realization, then looked at Xia Luot in surprise. She didn't expect this young lady to understand the hardships of the people so well. I thought you were spoiled since childhood, but it seems I was wrong. I was when I was young, but I changed after father got a strange lamp. Xia Luot smiled bitterly as she recalled the events of a few years ago. Luoya held the teacup and blinked as she sipped. Lamp? Yeah, it was about 4 years ago. It was a strange requiem lamp. Puff. Cough, cough, cough. The black-haired youth suddenly coughed when he heard Xia Luot mention requiem lamp. Xia Luot was shocked and quickly patted Luoya's back. Dear? Are you okay? I'm fine. Ha ha ha, continue. What about the lamp? Oh, that requiem lamp is a treasure that father obtained from somewhere. Although it's a consumable item, the other party offered a rather low price for it. It's probably a friendly gesture from some family related to Serophia. However, after obtaining that lamp, father's requirements for me suddenly became stricter. The young lady who had been suffering for so many years finally found someone to talk to. When she saw that her lover had finally found someone to talk to, she began to talk about her grievances bit by bit. From the fringe to Twin Horn Harbor, the difficulties she faced along the way had left her at a loss, but she had no choice but to grit her teeth and endure. Luoya couldn't help but feel guilty when he heard the reddish-brown-haired girl's story. Luoya was very familiar with requiem lamps. If he guessed correctly, the lamp Xia Luo mentioned should be the one he sold at a low price when he was in need of money. What he didn't expect was that Bruce was the one who bought the requiem lamp. Furthermore, it seemed to have greatly affected Bruce's nurturing strategy for his daughter. Luoya naturally didn't expect that Xia Luo's life trajectory would be subtly altered. As expected, the items in the system shouldn't be sold blindly. If a requiem lamp could change Xia Luot's life for the past few years, what about the other items? Luoya was secretly frightened. In Xia Luot's eyes, he was worried for her. The young lady smiled sweetly and decided to change the topic. This mountain road is rather bumpy. Dear, how are you feeling? I'm fine. Although I don't feel much better, I can still bear the bumps. Luoya felt the carriage tremble as he spoke. Normally, the Sorofia family's carriages were both shock-absorbing and shock-absorbing. Normally, when traveling on official roads, one wouldn't feel it at all inside the carriage. The trembling this time meant that the road conditions were rather bad. Of course, it was also because this was a small carriage. The gemstone necklace fleet was too large. Naturally, they couldn't bring it to the mountains to see the stars. Therefore, the two of them switched to a smaller carriage. According to Luoya's observation, this was originally a single-person carriage. Although it wasn't crowded with two people, there wasn't much space left after they sat side by side. As for why they sat side by side instead of across from each other, it was naturally Miss Xiaoluo's idea. Luoya couldn't do anything about it, and was powerless to resist. As he thought about this, the carriage jolted again. Luoya's weak body couldn't help but sway. Xiaoluo's eyes lit up. She pretended to inadvertently open her arms, and let the young man fall into her embrace. Dear? I'm sorry. Feeling the soft touch behind his head, Luoya hurriedly tried to get up. However, he didn't expect Xiaoluo to reach out and hug him. Since you're here, don't move. If you can't sit properly, the two of you can hug each other. You sigh, forget it. Looking at the playful smile on the red-haired girl's face, Luoya sighed helplessly. After experiencing it for the past few days, he had basically given up resisting. Chapter 187. Rosetta City of the Rosetta Commercial United Nations was a very interesting city. What kind of impression would people have when they thought of a commercial city? Presumably, most people's first reaction would be openness. Openness was the prerequisite for commercial exchanges. A country that was completely closed to the outside world was often described as a closed country. It was often accompanied by poverty and rampant smuggling. A closed country for a long time was likely to make it unable to keep up with the pace of the times, and gradually fall behind and be eliminated. Rosetta City was a city that was completely different from a closed country, but visually, it had a sense of heaviness that was completely different from the open country. Rosetta City was tall and deep, and its defensive facilities were the best in Xia. It was far better than Lorraine, the capital of Saint Maester, which had never been invaded by foreign enemies. However, after passing through the tightly guarded walls, the prosperity inside was unprecedented in Xia. The two could be said to form a sharp contrast. It couldn't be helped. Rosetta City was a city that had been robbed more than 10 times in history. The local residents generally had some hereditary psychological diseases, such as fall phobia, food anxiety, etc. The specific symptoms were very obvious, and the general manifestation was that they liked to be big and thick. The city walls, moats, and all the fortifications could be thicker or higher. Weapons had to be ready, and the inventory had to be always full. Not to mention the food, which was a good ancestral habit of the residents of Rosetta City. This was a city that was afraid of being robbed, but it had to be said that this idea of being vigilant in times of peace was actually very good. In fact, after the withdrawal of Austin's troops 100 years ago, the theocracy gradually stopped interfering in the affairs of Rosetta. The nearby small countries had been restless for a while, but they basically stopped after walking around Rosetta. Damn it! Why did you stop fighting? The first thing you did was to build the city walls. Are you Rosetta people sick? This was the common thought of many kings of the nearby small countries after visiting Rosetta City. At that time, Luoya's grandfather, Bran, had just signed a marriage contract with Sorofia. According to Bran's thinking at that time, the two families would be connected by marriage in 10 years' time. Since Sorofia was one of his own, he naturally had to protect her. Furthermore, Akat Hill didn't have anything they wanted. They only had enough soldiers and specialized in fighting. The kings of the surrounding small countries discussed for a long time, and realized that they might not be able to defeat Sorofia even if they tied themselves together. Therefore, the kings slapped their thighs and decided to return to their own homes and find their mothers. This was one of the good relations between King Lo She and Akat territory at that time. In fact, in the Rose Commercial United Nations, although the Akat family's reputation wasn't as high as in the theocracy, they still had a lot of influence, especially in the military. In the past, when the Akkad territory helped Loche defeat the Austin Empire, although it was a great victory, the Austin Empire wasn't a good-for-nothing. They also brought some casualties to the Akkad army. Many of the soldiers who participated in the war died in this land. At that time, many of the soldiers were buried on the spot. After peace, the later generations came to move the graves and pay their respects. The people of Rosetta were quite particular. They had built a cemetery for the good neighbors who had helped Rosetta win the war to establish their country. In the past, the Akkad family would send people here every year, but in the past 20 years, when most of the generation had passed away, the frequency had decreased to once every 5 years. From Locke's military headquarters up, the most senior veterans and generals were often pro-Akkad, and at the same time, they were extremely hostile to the Austin Empire. Many of them even knew each other, and they were also staunch opponents of Bruce's marriage. A marriage with the Austin Empire, even if it was a stable ducal family, in their eyes, was bowing to the invaders. It was an insult to their past achievements and trampling on Rosetta's ideals. In fact, Bruce's wife, Adelisa, was indeed a serious believer in the bloodline theory. At that time, this could be said to have caused an uproar among the senior officials of Rosetta. Many people were fiercely opposed. The attitude of the military towards this woman was imaginable. The pressure from all sides was one of the reasons why Adelisa returned to her country. However, although the disgusting descendant of the invaders left, it didn't mean that the matter was over. In fact, Adelisa's actions still left a bad effect in Rosetta, and that was the impact on Sialuot. Although Sialuot was a member of the Sorofia family, she was half Austin. This was a serious disadvantage in the eyes of some old guys. Not to mention, her mother was an idiot who was brainwashed by the bloodline theory. This family background was really weak as an heir. This was also the reason why Bruce wanted Sialuot to solve a family problem. But now Bruce knew that these were not needed anymore. In the conference room, looking at the golden soul that drew a golden trajectory in the air and manipulated freely like an extension of the spell, the Sorofia family master, Bruce, who was expressionless, blushed. He clenched his fists, and his eyes widened. He was obviously very excited. This is the living gold of the kingdom of Sorofia recorded in the ancient books? It's amazing. I didn't expect there to be such a cursed vessel in the world. Bruce was moved by the reappearance of the cursed vessel that carried the glory of his ancestors. However, what he didn't expect was that this was just the beginning. What followed was a series of novel curses, the ultimate expansion of the bloodline ability, the balance of fate, the general design structure and piloting method of the golden battleship, etc. Sialuot sent them one by one. Bruce went from excitement to surprise, and finally, he was completely numb. It couldn't be helped. The things that Sialuot presented were so shocking that Bruce couldn't react for a while. He could only ask his trusted scholar, Andrew, to quickly examine them. But in fact, even without the examination, Bruce knew that those lost supernatural curses and techniques were definitely not fake, because every one of them could vaguely resonate with his bloodline. There was no doubt that Sialuot had made a great contribution to the family this time. She had completely solved the dilemma of the House of Sorofia, which had been plaguing the family for hundreds of years. In terms of importance, it was far more important than the Fringe and Twinhorn Harbor. With these legacies, the House of Sorofia would be able to get rid of the predicament of relying on the supernatural families as their main fighting force within the next 10 years. They would truly become as prosperous as the angel family Heathcliff. Great contribution was no longer enough to describe Sialuot. It should be said that she had made a great contribution. With this achievement, Sialuot's position would no longer be shaken by anyone. She would definitely become the next leader of the House of Sorofia. With such a joyous occasion, the meeting room was filled with a harmonious atmosphere. The leaders of several important departments were very excited. However, the military, the one who applied these techniques, the old man sitting next to Bruce, was rather uncomfortable. Eugene Sorofia, the oldest member of the Sorofia family, was an old man who had personally experienced the war to establish the House of Sorofia 100 years ago. He was currently the representative of the Eagle faction who hated Austin to the core. He believed that the two countries would go to war. Therefore, he didn't like his descendant who had Austin's bloodline, especially when she was a woman. The identity of a woman was an unstable factor for a ruler. What if she had a screw loose like her mother and believed in some bullshit bloodline theory, and married into Austin with her country? Wouldn't that be a total loss? Xia Luo's background made the suspicious old man very unhappy. Therefore, even though this discovery made him blush with excitement, there was no smile on his face. I can't believe you were able to discover the ruins of the kingdom of Sorofia all by yourself. Well done, said Eugene in a flat tone. This was the greatest compliment he could give to Xia Luo. However, he didn't expect that this rare compliment would not be accepted. Chapter 188. In some ways, Rose's military was a very abstract organization. Normally, as a country's military, its foreign policy should follow the country's. For example, the Church of St. Maester was at odds with Austin, so the military naturally wouldn't give them a good face. But in Rose there was a strange point. The military's foreign policy and diplomacy were separated. Rose was founded on commerce, and the Sorofia Chamber of Commerce was established all over the world. When doing business, the most important thing was to make money. Back then, Bruce's marriage was not only for diplomacy, but also to break into Austin's huge market and avoid being fleeced. However, different professions led to different philosophies. Businessmen needed to be friendly, but soldiers didn't have such good tempers. This was especially true for the Hawks, who had deep feuds. They really wanted Austin to die immediately. Thus, Rosetta's unique political characteristics came into play. Although the government wasn't particularly friendly with the Austin Empire, it was still tolerable. On the other hand, the military was engaged in mock battles every day, and whenever they had nothing to do, they would celebrate Memorial Day. They even mass-produced full-body portraits of General Austin, and gave them to the soldiers to practice their swordsmanship on, claiming that it would increase the morale of the soldiers. As for the successor, Xia Luo, the military represented by Eugene, made a lot of sarcastic remarks. Xia Luo wasn't only disliked by his mother, but also disliked by the elders in Sorofia. However, this situation had now changed. Xia Luo was going to marry the only son of the Akat family, and it wasn't a formal marriage. It was the kind that dared to steal people. According to Sorofia's origin substance, this situation was basically a dead end. When he heard this news, the way Eugene looked at Xia Luo changed. Akat territory was Rose's longtime military ally, and the Church of St. Maester was a sworn enemy of the Austin Empire. Xia Luo's choice was basically cutting off all ties with the Austin Empire. Marriage alliance, Austin no Akat very good. Inside the conference room, the white-haired Marshal Eugene patted Xia Luo's shoulder, as if he was looking at a filial grandson. His stern old face actually revealed a smile that had never been seen before. There was no trace of the dignified look he had when he jumped out to reprimand Xia Luo a few seconds ago. This huge contrast made everyone present look at each other. Bruce wasn't surprised at all. Rather, he already knew that things would develop like this. After Xia Luo brought Luoya back to France, the first thing she did was to seek support from her father, Bruce. As the de facto ruler of France, Xia Luo could only withstand the enormous pressure from the theocracy if Bruce was truly on her side. When he saw the reddish-haired girl lowering her head and pleading, Bruce had mixed feelings. Xia Luo was already 13 years old, and she had matured very quickly due to the magic element in her body. She would be considered an adult at 14 years old. Although most nobles generally delayed marriage for 2 to 4 years, that didn't stop Xia Luo from choosing her sweetheart in advance. As a father, Bruce naturally couldn't bear to see his daughter fall in love with someone else. But when he recalled the life he had with Xia Luo over the years, Bruce could only sigh helplessly. It was true that Adelisa wasn't a qualified mother, but what about Bruce? Come to think of it, Bruce had spent very little time with Xia Luo over the past 10 years. He didn't show much warmth to her. Instead, he used to exert pressure on her. Xia Luo was also very independent. She had never asked Bruce for anything since she was a child. Even when the development of the fringe wasn't going well, she endured it. Today, however, was the first time his daughter had asked him for a favor. Was there a need to ask what he needed to do? At that moment, Bruce realized that he might indeed need to leave his limited time for the Empire. But that didn't stop him from fulfilling his responsibilities as a father. At the very least, he had to step in for his daughter's happiness at the most critical moment. Therefore, he called for this meeting to let the representatives of the various factions witness Xia Luo's great achievements and irreplaceable qualities. It had to be said that the meeting was a great success. With Xia Luo's achievements and the confirmation of her status as the successor, the various factions' attitudes towards Xia Luo had changed. They were more respectful and more amiable. After analyzing Luoya's incident in detail, they generally maintained a wait-and-see attitude. Of course, it was rare for the military to have a 180-degree change in attitude. Bruce didn't expect that Xia Luo's engagement would make these old fogies so happy. But thanks to this, Xia Luo's support had increased, and it was a very strong one at that. Regarding the engagement, everyone present agreed to keep it a secret for the time being. Eugene was rather dissatisfied with this. He believed that the engagement should be announced to the entire city, and that it would be best if the engagement could be held tomorrow. As for what Akkad would do, Eugene was prepared to personally negotiate with him. Fortunately, Bruce didn't approve of such a radical idea. Now that Lo She had just received the inheritance of the Sophia dynasty's ancestors, there were still many things he needed to do. Therefore, he tried his best to minimize the impact of this meeting. In fact, Bruce's messenger was already on his way. After the meeting was over, everyone went back to work. The red-haired girl in the middle of the room looked around and heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that Lo She's matter was settled for now, but that didn't mean that the crisis was over. Instead, it was the beginning of a series of tests. Next, there would be external interference. Thinking of the two girls, Xia Luo slowly clasped his hands. Luoya Akkad had always felt that his psychological quality was quite good, or rather, he felt that he was a very Buddhist person. Regardless of whether it was the fact that his future was bleak after transmigrating, or the fact that he was able to calmly deal with several life and death crises, it all proved that he had a big heart. Although he was occasionally a little flustered, it did not affect his actions. When he felt that he had to do something, when he stepped onto the stage, his performance was basically extraordinary. However, even with such a firm heart, Luoya had to admit that he couldn't be Buddhist anymore. He had been kidnapped. How could he still be Buddhist? Looking at the unfamiliar ceiling for the umpteenth time, the black-haired boy had a rough understanding of his situation. It had been 5 minutes since he woke up. In these 5 minutes, Luoya carefully observed the surrounding situation, and could basically confirm one thing. That was this should be Lo She's or Xia Luo's home. To be more precise, this was her bedroom. The evidence was that the Milky Way on the ceiling was exactly the same as the one in the jewel necklace fleet, but it was more delicate, and the blessing was more effective and gentle. On the other hand, the faint golden light on the pillow also reminded Luoya. Chapter 189. While Rosetta City was bustling, Roha was doubting his life and praying silently in the mist bedroom. Thousands of miles away, Akate City was quite calm. But this calm was the happiness of ordinary people, but it was the misfortune of those who knew about it. Luoya Akkad, the acting lord of the Akkad family, the chief planner who led the people to become rich in the past few years, the only heir of the next generation, and the owner of many important titles, was now missing. To be honest, this was something that no one dared to write about in this era's story. Luoya was kidnapped by the young lady of the neighboring Luosu. This was a fact that the upper echelons of the Akkad family were unwilling to and could not tell the people. Even if there were rumors in the border area, the Akkad family would never admit it. Instead, they had to pinch their noses and deny it. That's right, losing a lord was so shameful. Once the news spread, the nobles in the Holy Land would not like the Akkad family, and the Akkad family would definitely mock and ridicule them. Most importantly, once this matter became a diplomatic issue, then it would escalate to the level of a country, and there would definitely be some forces that would come to discuss them. For example, the Austin Empire. This was the common goal of the Akkad family, Heidi Kreet's royal family, and the unreasonable kidnapper Sorophia. However, at this moment, the Akat family's mansion was eerily silent. In the conference room, Ai Lizzie and Nua Iyer were sitting on the left and right sides of the long table. The blonde girl held the armrest of the chair with a gloomy expression, while the silver-haired girl pointed at the princess and trembled with anger. 5 days ago, Nua Iyer released news about Xia Luo's suspected kidnapping of Luoya. When Ai Lizzie saw it, she was shocked, but then she was full of questions. The silver-haired girl really did not understand why Xia Luo would do this. One had to know that Sophia's status as the young lady's fiancé had always been as stable as Mount Tai before Noel had rushed over. This time, the princess had gone to deliver a heavy blow. How could she run away before the punch had even landed? Ai Lizzie was puzzled, but she did not dare to delay and immediately set off for home. According to the last part of the letter, Nua Iyer had led the troops to chase after Sophia. Judging from the distance and time, the princess would be able to catch up with them before the border. In other words, although this incident seemed scary, the result should be scary but not dangerous. After making this judgment according to the content, Ai Lizzie did not panic. Instead, she was very happy. Regardless of the reason, Xia Luo had made this big mistake, to the extent that even her identity as the fiancé could not cover it. It can be said that after this incident, the fiancé incident will come to an end. Sophia will be swept into the garbage by the Akate family, and will have nothing to do with Roja. Alright, I'll deal with one more. With this thought in mind, Ai Lizzie returned to the Akat family. However, she did not expect to see Luo Ye's familiar face when she returned. Instead, she saw Nua Iyer's extremely gloomy face, followed by one bad news after another. This made the silver-haired girl understand one thing, and that is, Ai Lizzie's elder brother was really lost. Didn't you say that you could catch up? Where is the person you caught up with? I did catch up with her, but it's just a bait. Oh, a bait? Don't joke around. Even if it's a bait, Sophia can't be faster than you in this kind of winter. What happened? Under Ai Lizzie's angry interrogation, the princess's face became more and more unsightly. She was silent for a long time, thinking of the soldiers who were with her. She finally opened her mouth and told the truth. Nua Iyer actually caught up with her, and she was indeed the winner in this race of life and death in the Akat family territory. However, what the princess and everyone else did not expect was that Xia Luo changed the game to werewolf and successfully pretended to be a villager. When Nua Iyer led a large group of people into the mountains for half a day, what they saw was not Sophia's exquisite mountain carriage, but a group of local villagers who were hunting. Looking at those part-time hunters who were trembling in fear, the princess immediately understood that they had fallen into a trap. At that moment, Nua Iyer's brain went numb. She recalled the old woman who spoke to her in front of the village, and suddenly remembered a very important question. That old woman, she didn't have any spell fluctuations on her body, so Nua Iyer just glanced at her and categorized her as a normal person. However, Nua Iyer forgot that it wasn't the holy capital where the living conditions were good, but a remote village in the mountains in the south. In this era, due to various reasons such as inconvenient transportation, high physical labor, and lack of medical treatment, the life expectancy of the people in this area was generally lower than that of the city. It was considered good for a village to have one such old person, and because of living in such a harsh environment for so many years, their bodies were almost passively mutated to become transcendents. The reason why the village head was filled with old people in the meeting was not only because these old people were experienced, but also because these seemingly weak old people were probably the best fighters in the village. They didn't become transcendents because they were old, but because they became transcendents, they could live to old age. However, the old woman that Nua Iyer saw at that time didn't have any spell fluctuations on her body. Unless the princess was lucky enough to meet someone who could live to old age by relying on luck, there was only one possibility, and that was this person's spell fluctuations had to be eliminated. This person was Xia Luo. When she understood all this, Nua Iyer felt a chill in her heart. She wanted to turn back, but she didn't have the strength to chase after her. Xia Luo had calculated everything in half a day, so how could she have the chance to escape? By the time she caught up, Luoya and the others had already crossed the border of Russia. This time, I was too impatient and didn't think things through, so she took advantage of the loophole. The blonde girl recalled the previous experience and clenched her teeth. Her eyes were emotionless, but the anger hidden under the calmness stunned Ai Lizzie. But if Xia Luo thinks that this is the end, then she is too naive and underestimated me. As Luo Ye's protector, her actions directly challenge my authority and Heathcrete's authority. She must bear the consequences of her actions. What do you want to do? Chapter 190. Southwest of Rosetta City, in the vast Sorophia Manor, the sound of birds chirping in the morning came from outside the window. Xia Luo Sorophia stood by the window, puzzled. The refreshing sunlight shone on the girl's body, and her long brown-red hair was like a dancing flame. It had been 2 hours since she showed her harvest in the conference room. Xia Luo was worried about Luoya, so she naturally wouldn't stay in the joint council hall for long. She was rushing home because according to the situation of the curse, Luoya should wake up this morning. 3 days ago, since Xia Luo activated the curse to make Luoya faint on the mountain, the brown-red-haired girl had been in a state of anxiety. Using such a method to forcibly take Luoya away, not only was the reaction of the outside world a problem, but Luoya's own attitude was also a problem. In this world, although the ability and status of women were not lower than men because of magic and extraordinaries, the dignity of a ruler was still very important. And Luoya was a de facto ruler. Akate territory was vast, and its military strength and population were even far greater than that of a small country. Under the feudal system, it was completely like an independent small kingdom. As the acting feudal lord of such a young power, Luoya's self-esteem couldn't be more natural. Xia Luo used such a rude method to take Luoya away this time, so the backlash was likely to destroy the relationship between the two. Although she understood each other's character, the cautious girl still didn't dare to take risks. She could only seize the opportunity to make up for it, just like what she promised Luoya under the starry sky. House of 100 Birds. This was the name of the manor located in the southwest corner of Rosetta, covering a large area and even having a large garden. In the past, this place was used as the command center for street battles after the city was breached. There were troops stationed nearby all year round, but after 100 years of peace, they gradually withdrew their defenses. Now, it was the headquarters of the Sorophia family. However, there were only Bruce and Xia Luo in this house. Bruce had been busy with work all year round, so this house had almost become Xia Luo's single-person residence. The name of the 100 Birds Garden was derived from the hundreds of mutated bird-type creatures in this manor. At the very beginning, this place was used as a command post to communicate with the entire city. The archery skills and power of the soldiers of this world were aided by curses. Usually, ordinary messenger pigeons would be shot to death on the spot. As a last resort, Lo Shay could only purchase domesticated bird-type monsters. Not only did she have to increase the quantity, but she also had to consider the unique effects of various curses. Sorophia also tried her best to increase the variety of bird species. The war between Austin and Lo Shay lasted for a long time, so naturally, she bought more and more bird species. By 100 years ago, there were already hundreds of species. Then they all lost their jobs. Xia Luo's childhood could be said to have grown up in the company of servants and these birds. Therefore, the girl liked this place very much and hoped that her lover would like it as well. Also, from the perspective of recuperation, it was good for the body and mind to see animals often. But what made Xia Luo puzzled was that Luoya's situation was different from what she had imagined. "My dear, are you still not awake?" How could? Hearing the words of the servants outside the door, the red-haired girl quickly walked into the room and came to the luxuriously decorated bed. This bedroom was Xia Luo's absolute private domain. Until now, no man had ever entered. Even the servants had to wait for orders or use curses to communicate outside the room. The only one who had the authority to knock on the door was Gulacy. But now there was an intruder in this private domain. Xia Luo looked down at the sleeping black-haired boy. Her expression was gentle but also a little worried. Why can't he wake up? Was it a mistake in controlling the curse power? Or is it because Luoya's body is weak? The young mistress frowned in confusion. Just as she was about to take a closer look, she suddenly realized that the small bottle beside Luoya's pillow was a little out of place. It was a stabilizer that contained the golden soul that Xia Luot had temporarily refined. She had set aside a portion of her curse power to stabilize Luoya's body when she wasn't around. But now, the placement of this small bottle was a little different from what she remembered. I remember that I placed it vertically, right? It's actually horizontally. This is looking at the glowing bottle. The red-haired girl couldn't help but smile. She didn't make a sound and just quietly approached. Then, she reached out and gently pinched the nose of the sleeping boy. As the saying goes, no one can wake up a person who is pretending to be asleep. Xia Luot agreed with this saying. But people can't, but the air has no obstruction or effect. 5 seconds passed, 10 seconds passed. When Xia Luot counted to 15 in her heart, the sleeping black-haired boy suddenly opened his eyes quietly. His golden pupils met the girl's emerald eyes. Then he reached out and gently patted Xia Luot's hand. Uft! Looking at Luoya's actions, Xia Luot let go of her hand and couldn't help but chuckle. The black-haired boy didn't reprimand her. He sat up with a smile and a calm tone, as if he had just woken up and didn't know what was going on. Good morning, Miss Xia Luot. It's been a long sleep. Where are we today? The black-haired boy looked at the girl in front of him and asked with a smile. His attitude and smile were perfect and polite, but the red-haired girl's heart skipped a beat when she saw this. Politeness was a weapon that Luoya hadn't used against Xia Luot for a long time. This weapon used to be the most powerful shield when they met, and it was also the perfect protection that outsiders couldn't find fault with. However, that was in the past, and the relationship between the two of them was no longer the same as it was a month ago. Now that Luoya was acting like this, it could only mean one thing, and that was that he was angry. The black-haired boy was being polite, because he felt that the relationship between the two of them had deteriorated to the point where he needed to use etiquette to maintain it. It was like two countries signing an armistice agreement. Both sides wanted the other side to die, but on the surface, they had to put on a smile and hide their anger deep in their hearts. Of course, Luoya's situation wasn't that serious, but Xia Luot took it seriously. Or rather, it was the reason why she rushed back this time. My dear, you said that you would forgive me. Facing Luoya's silent reprimand, the noble young lady was silent for a moment and lowered her head. Her voice was choked with sobs, and the black-haired boy couldn't help but relax, but then he hardened his heart and straightened his face. Today, Xia Luot was dressed formally in a long dress because she was going to attend a meeting. Wrapped in a light blue dress, the girl had a steady charm that was different from the past. The earrings on her ears and the necklace on her neck were carefully matched with the dress. Her scattered red-brown hair swayed around her slender neck, making her look a little sexy. Chapter 191. Luoya was a tolerant person. This was the definition he gave to himself recently. In Xiya's world, which was full of extraordinary powers and grotesque, there were too many things that were different from Luoya's previous world. The power of money was actually limited, but there were also some things that were the same in this world. For example, Luoya was poor. When the black-haired young man saw the golden mountain shining under the sun in the early morning, the desire for wealth from 2 lifetimes was like a flood that broke through the dam. It wasn't just the desire that he suppressed for so many years, but also the relief of being able to return the money. The loan was like a mountain. Wherever you went, it would move. You could ignore it, but it would always be there, and it would even grow taller. The system loan with the monthly interest of 30,000 gold coins had always been a shadow that Luoya couldn't get rid of. As for the initial loan that might cause the system to shut down, it was like a hand that was strangling Luoya's throat. As long as he could get rid of these 2 big troubles, Luoya would forgive Xia Luot. In the end, he didn't really hold a grudge against Miss Xia Luot. It was just that he didn't want to lose face, and this matter was really ridiculous. But now that he had a cart of gold coins, Luoya changed his mind. What? Kidnap Tarose? It was complete nonsense. Akat's special price acting feudal lord, Mr. Luoya, now felt that this matter wasn't ridiculous at all. He even began to consider whether this matter should be classified as an emergency diplomatic matter. To the outside world, it was fine to pay him to come to Rose. In short, the black-haired young man gave in. I wanted to refuse, but she gave me too much. Luoya thought as he silently accepted Xia Luo's compensation. Using this as an opportunity, he couldn't keep a straight face anymore. It was better to say that he couldn't keep a straight face. By the way, is it okay if I just take these gold coins? Of course, dear. If you like, you can just leave them here. There's no need for that. Although it felt good to wake up and look at the gold mountain every day, the thought of returning more than half of the luo made his heart ache. As the saying goes, it's better to get it over with quickly than to prolong the pain. Since he had to return it anyway, he might as well do it right from the start. Out of sight, out of mind. Luoya thought as she got out of bed. Xia Luo waved her hand to signal the servants who were pushing the cart to leave the room. The young man strolled to the side of the gold cart with the girl's help and silently stretched out his black hole-like hands. He couldn't take it away, but he could take it away. The young man sighed, trying to find joy in his misery. The next moment, a scene that even the experienced and knowledgeable Xia Luo could not believe appeared. In the blink of an eye, less than half of the gold mountain was left. It was simply a miracle of physics. The reddish-brown-haired girl looked at the mountain of gold coins that had shrunk by half. She pondered for a while but still couldn't understand. Xia's world was still very stable. Space spells were mysterious and had no practical use at all. Most of the related items were also blank. The gemstone necklace fleet was already considered the best in this aspect. Although she was puzzled, Xia Luo did not ask. The girl understood that everyone had their own secrets. As a descendant of an ancient family, Luoya was even more so. To a certain extent he was willing to do this in front of Xia Luo because he trusted her. But trust was trust, and Xia Luo did not want to ask. The girl pondered on the side, but she did not know that Luoya's mind was not on this matter at all. Gold coins accepted. According to loan restrictions, mortgage loans will be repaid first. Mortgage loans have been cancelled. Detected host's balance. Proceeding with repayment. Interest loans have been cancelled. Loan repayment completed. A total of 650,000 gold coins have been consumed. Host's reputation level has increased. It's not difficult to borrow again. It's better to be friends than to be friends for a long time. This system will travel with the host all the way. After reading the large number of notifications that popped up in the system after the repayment of the gold coins, Luoya's eyebrows twitched. It took him a long time to suppress the overwhelming feeling in his heart. What's wrong? King Loan Shark, and now you're expressing your feelings? If it weren't for Xia Luo, how would I repay you the interest of 30,000 gold coins a month? Luoya, who was supported by the girl, could not openly complain. He could only sit by the bed and gasp for breath. He looked at the mountain of gold that had shrunk by more than half. But soon, the young man defeated his selfish desires and thought things through. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.